I become the Demon King in Marvel. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 501 Black Brazen Egg, we still need help. Captain is right. We have no other choice, Nick Fury said gravely. These 100 clones in the air are equivalent to 100 Ms. Marvel Carols. While their individual strength is somewhat inferior to Carol's, their numbers more than make up for it. In terms of individual combat power, no one here can defeat a single clone, not even Kamala and Franklin. While Marvel Girl and Avatar possess potential, the former has only recently acquired their powers, while the latter is still a 10-year-old, and their physical development limits their capabilities. The white-haired black-boiled egg naturally had no idea of the Captain America's combat prowess before him, yet he was still applying the same model to other Captain Americas. The real Captain didn't offer much defense. The most important thing right now was to gather Asgardian reinforcements and ensure they wouldn't be divided and attacked by Apocalypse. It's unclear what technology Mr. Fantastic Reed had developed to allow him to contact his wife and children through the dimension created by his son, but given his intelligence and developmental abilities within the Marvel Universe, it wasn't surprising. Upon learning of his father, uncle, and others' intentions, Franklin Richards had no choice but to cancel the creation of the independent dimension. The moment the space was lost, the superheroes had to contend with the influx of Atlantic water. Those who could fly were fine, but those who couldn't were doomed to plummet. Fortunately, Marvel Girl Kamala Khan was awakened just in time and quickly used her ability to materialize photon energy, creating a purple-red energy ship to carry the flightless superheroes. The real Captain America didn't board the ship, but instead magically conjured a pair of wings and took to the sky. Oh my goodness! Captain America can fly, Marvel Girl and Phil Coulson's cybernetic body exclaimed in unison. One was a middle school girl, the other had inherited the memories of a Captain America fanboy. The other adults, after their surprise, had mixed expressions, especially the paranoid Nick Fury, whose face was filled with gloom. This Captain America isn't normal. The real Captain, taking to the sky, ignored the others' thoughts and immediately took out his communicator to call Tony Stark and Captain Black Skull. Stark, Rogers, are you still alive? Captain Rogers, all the equipment on the ground has been destroyed by the explosion. Jarvis' voice reached the real Captain, a signal transmitted from a satellite server in low Earth orbit. I warned Mr. Stark of the alien bombardment in advance. He deployed his suit's shields, so he might still be alive. The other Captain Rogers and his two teammates have lost contact, as have the consortium leaders transferred from our universe. Jarvis quickly reported the situation to the real Captain. The real Captain had been in an isolated space created by Franklin, where ordinary electronic signals couldn't penetrate. Damn it, Steve, flapping his magical wings, soared into the sky. Looking out, the backflowing seawater had submerged the ruins of New York City. Aside from a few surviving superheroes on the purple-red energy ship below, no one else was alive. The sea washed over the wreckage, carrying mud with it, forming a turbulent undercurrent that swept human corpses and traces of civilization into the vast ocean. A dark figure bobbed within the muddy undercurrent. Captain Black Skull, missing an arm and a leg, was sinking into the inky depths of the ocean. Suddenly, a figure in a white lab coat emerged from the water. Though submerged, the water flowed through him unimpeded, as if he were no longer in the water. At first glance, the figure appeared unremarkable, but upon closer inspection, a brilliant halo emanated from behind his head. With a flick of his fingers, Captain Black Skull, missing an arm and a leg, emerged from the undercurrent, rising to the surface and drifting with the current toward the southern coast. That's it, he withdrew his hand, continuing to caress the black ball in his arms. 3 white slits formed its surface, forming eyes and a mouth. As if the owner had been too forceful, the ball rolled its eyes at him. Okay, it's over. Let's go. The figure in the white lab coat vanished, as abruptly as he had arrived. Beyond the multiverse, Eternal's gaze fixed on Earth, but his omniscience and omnipotence failed to notice the sudden appearance of the white coat. Eternal's concern stemmed from Lin Hao's presence on Earth and the repeated appearances of a mysterious force that favored America in this universe. This puzzled Eternal, and he yearned to understand the nature of that mysterious force. Although he couldn't see the sudden appearance of the white coat, he did see Captain Black Skull resurfacing, and a trace of doubt crept into his mind. However, his doubts were instantly dispelled, as his omniscience saw that it was an erratic ocean current that had struck Black Skull, freeing him from the current that had swept him deep into the ocean. Seeing this as a normal occurrence, Eternal dismissed his concern, as the mysterious force hadn't reappeared. Meanwhile, across the ocean, Lin Hao remained aloft in the clouds, observing the battle unfolding in America and awaiting Eternal's next move. Indeed, Lin Hao still believed that the alteration of the universe's rules was the work of Eternal, who had personally intervened without shame. His assumption was not wrong, for that mysterious power was indeed altering the rules of the universe through eternity. After all, eternity was the embodiment of the multiverse. However, Lin Hao didn't yet know that eternity was also being forced into this business. The battle between Apocalypse's clone army and Odin and the Supreme Evolutionary continued. The real captain, soaring into the sky, realized that New York City was completely deserted and charged at Apocalypse, seething with rage. While the Sovereigns were the primary culprits for the New York disaster, any vengeance should be directed at the Guardians of the Galaxy, who had brought disaster upon Earth. However, the transformed Captain America lacked the unwarranted wrath of ordinary men. He was fully aware that the greatest crisis facing America right now lay with Apocalypse and his clone army. As for the Sovereigns, the direct perpetrators, he intended to personally visit the universe and settle accounts with them after resolving the matter. With another reason to request leave and strike, the head of the Lone Star Republic felt a sense of unwarranted joy. Magical energy surged, and a sea of blood reappeared. With his magic sword in hand, the real captain charged directly at Apocalypse, who was shielded by several clones. The blood-red hue that obscured the sky and the sun left the superheroes below stunned. This, Coulson's mechanical form faltered. Is this Captain America? It asked, echoing the thoughts of everyone. This color, it looks evil, Mr. Fantastic Reed frowned. Blood and red, to an elite eagle like him, were both evil. That guy can't be Captain America, Nick Fury frowned and gritted his teeth. There's something wrong with him, Director. I heard them say there's SHIELD in this universe, too, Mike reported to his former director like a lackey. What? Nick Fury exclaimed in shock. Their universe, Earth 616, was a vast multiverse, home to almost every supernatural organization, and had long known about the existence of parallel universes. As the former director of SHIELD, who had led SHIELD for many years, Nick Fury was naturally aware of SHIELD, and even knew it was a rare organization in the multiverse. Unlike the ever-present SHIELD, however, he didn't dare underestimate it. It seems we need some help. Chapter 502, The Spear of Eternity penetrates Apocalypse. The sudden appearance of a sea of blood shocked the superheroes above. Apocalypse, watching Steve Rogers charging at him with sword drawn, had a solemn expression. He sensed a powerful energy surge from the sea. Apocalypse had regained his body, but the majority of the consciousness that had inhabited his former body had been destroyed by the starship's main gun, making it difficult to recover. Souls and consciousness in the Marvel Universe are a unique form of energy. As energy, they can be attacked by other energies, causing them to be depleted. While the consciousness of each individual varies in strength, there is no hierarchy within the soul. Once energy is depleted, it can be replenished by finding a source of energy from the same source. Magic, divine power, the Mind Stone, and the Soul Stone can all replenish damaged souls and consciousness. In the comics, there are numerous instances where souls imbued with objects are replenished and reborn through artifacts, magical items, and even man-made technology. Amidst a fierce battle, Apocalypse naturally had no time to find ways to replenish his damaged soul energy. However, aside from the reduction of his psychic abilities, his endurance was only affected, leading to fatigue, but his other supernatural powers remained intact. Simply put, his health and mana bars were reduced to a fraction, but this didn't affect the power of his skills. Facing the onslaught of Steve, Apocalypse didn't hesitate. He immediately created multiple force fields to protect himself, then commanded his 6 clones to form a tight circle around him. This universe's Apocalypse was different from the others. Since his reawakening, he'd encountered Lin Hao and Jia No. 1 in quick succession. After suffering losses, he had lost his blind confidence and regained the caution he'd lost thousands of years before. Faced with such a formidable force, Steve remained undaunted. Witnessing the devastation in New York, his only desire was to immediately destroy the enemy and restore normalcy. A barrage of photon energy blasted down upon him, but Steve, his eyes flushed red, manipulated the sea of blood overhead into a crimson claw. A strange suction force appeared, effectively sucking the photon energy inward. "Oh my god!" On the light ship below, the bright Kamala Khan exclaimed. After accidentally acquiring superpowers, the uncontrollable little brat also enjoyed using photon energy to create similar giant hands and fists to smash people. Seeing this, while there was a sense of familiarity, a sense of great minds think alike, the sinister red hue frightened him. What's he going to do? Mr. Fantastic Reed Richards felt a sense of familiarity, as he also liked to inflate his fists into giant fists. Having endured numerous hardships and been cut twice, Steve naturally wasn't as rudimentary in his abilities as they were. His bloody claws controlled the photon energy and quickly curled it into a shimmering sphere. Multicolored lights burst from the energy sphere, appearing dazzling, but only those who could sense the energy fluctuations could perceive its terrifying power. Steve couldn't stabilize the sphere for long, so without delay, he manipulated his bloody hand to blast it towards the multiple force fields set up by Apocalypse. The explosion erupted at the point where the energy sphere met the force field wall, sending a terrifying shockwave that spread in all directions. Only slightly less powerful than the previous shot from the starship's main gun. Apocalypse's force field was shattered by the energy ball, and the massive shockwave sent Steve flying, preventing him from executing his next attack. Fortunately, the battle-hardened Asgardian God King was present on the battlefield. He had already recognized Apocalypse as the mastermind behind the clones, and seeing this rare opportunity, he unhesitatingly raised the Spear of Eternity. Divine power surged, instantly spreading through the spear. This time, Odin didn't fire it, but instead hurled it directly at Apocalypse. The spear, named Gungnir, was forged by the Dwarf King himself and presented to Odin. The tip was engraved with a rune pierce, and the handle was a branch from the World Tree. The spear's power was both simple and powerful. One throw guarantees a hit. It was a divine spear that could pierce anything it struck, then automatically return to its owner. Sensing danger, Apocalypse teleported to save his life. However, a terrifying scene unfolded as Odin's spear, undeterred, also traversed space, piercing his newly created form before Apocalypse's astonished gaze. Asshole, Apocalypse, with a gaping hole in his chest, glared angrily at Odin. He immediately activated his healing abilities, attempting to restore his body. However, the process, once instantaneous, was now excruciatingly slow. The divine power imbued with the Spear of Eternity was slowing down Apocalypse's healing factor. Very good, your spear is excellent, Apocalypse glared at Odin. Though he had lived nearly as long as Odin, he had spent his youth in Africa, unaware of the war Odin had fought with the frost giants on Earth thousands of years earlier. However, Apocalypse had experienced the Zerg invasion of Earth, having accompanied Imhotep in destroying the Zerg hive and preventing Earth's destruction. He had seen the Spear of Imhotep before, and now, comparing it to Odin's Spear of Eternity, he found both had their merits. While the Spear of Imhotep lacked the one-hit kill attribute, it was strong enough to cleave through the shell of a Zerg hive. The Zerg are a race of creatures capable of traversing the starry skies and destroying stars with their mere physical strength. As the strongest of them, their hive couldn't be any weaker. Your spear reminds me of someone I once knew, Apocalypse said, unconcerned about the slow healing wound. Instead, a glint of nostalgia lingered in his gaze towards Odin. Holding the eternal spear, which had automatically flown back, Odin's gaze towards Apocalypse was, for the first time, serious. In the previous battle, his clones had caused him to underestimate the enemy and suffer a heavy loss. Odin had assumed Apocalypse was simply relying on his clones for his own violence, but he hadn't expected him to be so powerful himself. Over the millennia, few have managed to survive being pierced by the eternal spear. The clones lunged forward once more, interrupting Odin's attempts at a follow-up shot. These annoying clones were fast, powerful, and physically demanding. While their overall strength couldn't match that of Odin wielding the eternal spear, it wasn't much different. Even in his prime, Odin could only handle 4 or 5 at once, and the aged Odin could barely handle 2 or 3. The key was the speed of light flight ability, a bummer. Even the mighty Asgardian God King couldn't fly at the speed of light, relying on the Rainbow Bridge to get anywhere. Yet, an impulsive editor gave Carol the ability to fly at the speed of light. The editor, not even realizing how terrifying this was, simply gave it a random attribute to emphasize Carol's impressiveness. With this ability, Carol became a stubborn sticky figure who could fight enemies even when they couldn't defeat them. Odin, then, constantly experienced the troubles of stubborn sticky figures. Chapter 503 Hela appears. Thor, father, this woman is my stepmother? Excuse me, how did these clones learn to move so fast? As a brilliant biologist capable of modifying genes to create new species, the supreme evolutionary naturally saw through the clones' flaws. However, even he couldn't make his created organisms possess such immense strength and speed. He hadn't realized the clones' abilities extended beyond high speed. On Earth, Carol and the clones couldn't reach the speed of light in combat unless they were blasting off into space, and there were no enemies on Earth worthy of their speed. Despite this, Odin and the Supreme Evolutionary were facing clones capable of easily breaking through the first cosmic velocity. This was also faster than the reaction speeds of most powerful beings in the universe. Even Thanos in Endgame couldn't catch the sluggish Carol before he acquired the gauntlet. God King, we must find a way to limit their speed, otherwise we'll be on the receiving end. Despite the trouble, the Supreme Evolutionary was deeply intrigued by these clones. The perfect race he wanted to create must possess immense power. Otherwise, they would be nothing more than a group of weak insects. How could they be considered perfect? This planet, which he had just visited a few years earlier, had yet another specimen worthy of study. The Supreme Evolutionary, itching to capture a clone and bring it to his laboratory, was eager. Odin, perched on Pegasus's back, wielded the Eternal Spear, repelling two of the surrounding clones. The spear's tip grazing the clones' arms and abdomens only slashed through the colorful light enveloping them, leaving a shallow wound. This layer of light was the photon energy Carol had mastered, granting her immense strength and forming a sturdier armor, protecting her from the pressure of light-speed travel. While these clones lacked the ability to heal themselves, a wound of this magnitude would be no problem for an ordinary person. If Odin attempted to drain their health, he would likely die first. While a delivered Eternal Spear could guarantee a hit on the clones' heads, the problem was that such an attack drained his divine power, and the aging Odin could no longer unleash it with the unbridled energy of his youth. Even at the risk of his life, he could still unleash 20 or 30 more bursts. The problem was that there were over 50 clones out there alone, and the rest were simply trapped in the space created by Franklin Richards, ready to break out at any moment. Furthermore, the Earthlings on the sea below were most likely not native to this universe, and with a mad scientist nearby, Odin couldn't allow himself to be exhausted and weakened, or else the Supreme Evolutionary would undoubtedly be intensely curious about the body of the Asgardian God King. Would it then depend on Thor's foolish son to save the Asgardians? He'd thought this trip to Earth was just another display of martial prowess, but he'd never expected the enemy to be a sovereign. He'd never expected so many powerful individuals to suddenly appear on Earth. Had Helheim been too busy watching women bathe these days? Odin instantly dismissed these chaotic thoughts. After wielding his spear to repel the clone's attack, a hint of helplessness shone through his single eye. He raised the spear of eternity high, surging divine power once again. Golden energy flowed through the spear, yet it didn't eject or project. Instead, it slammed heavily into the void. Where the spear tip touched the void, a portal of light, streaked with golden veins, suddenly appeared. Sensing Odin's divine power, the golden veins on the portal began to twitch, and a moment later, a blue and black wormhole opened. The instant the wormhole appeared, a woman with disheveled hair emerged. She stepped into the air, swaying left and right, her mere steps revealing a voluptuous presence. "Oh, so you're not dead." Hela glanced at Odin, gathering her tousled hair with her hands and creating a deer antler hairstyle. On the ground, Thor, constantly flying between land and sea to rescue drowned soldiers, felt a sense of urgency. He looked up at the sky and saw a graceful woman beside his father. What fuck? Who is this woman? One of those wild women my father found out there. Odin, in the sky, had been looking at his daughter, imprisoned for over 1,000 years, with a complex expression. Suddenly, hearing his foolish son's words, his defenses snapped. He turned and roared downward, "Idiot, that's your sister." Bang! A clone rushed over and punched Odin in the face, sending the golden-armored God King flying. Hela, standing nearby, had no intention of helping. Instead, she twitched her lips. "Tisk, tisk, that looks painful." The God King's mount didn't dare look at the former princess and quickly flapped its wings to catch its sent flying master. Hela, who had been planning to offer more teasing, suddenly raised her hand and thrust a long sword from her palm, blocking the incoming fist. The immense force sent Hela flying over 10 meters. shattering the sword in her hand. I knew the old man had bad intentions. It turns out he's encountered a formidable foe. Hila, using her flying wing to deflect the force of the clone's punch, glanced around, discovering dozens of identical clones. Her expression immediately darkened. Even with just one punch, Hila had already grasped the clone's strength. While defeating a single clone with her strength wouldn't be a problem, it would take a long time. 99 would be injured, and the severity of the injury would depend on her performance. The problem was, there were simply too many clones in the sky. Yet, Hila hesitated for a moment before a fierce battle erupted. This Asgardian princess shouldn't be called the goddess of death, the goddess of war would be more apt. Hila was a warmonger who reveled in war. She had aided Odin in his conquests, defeating numerous civilizations. However, after conquering the 9 realms, Odin ceased expansion, needing a successor to maintain his legacy, and so Hela was sealed away. Furthermore, this Asgardian goddess of death is also the continent's dimensional devil. As long as Asgard survives, she remains immortal, indestructible, and invincible with each battle. This is precisely why Odin was forced to release her. If it weren't for the formidable and numerous clones, Odin would never have let her go. With renewed fighting spirit, Hela waved her hands, and 2 long swords materialized from her palms. Stepping through the air, she charged towards the clones that had attacked her, striking a decisive blow. Father, Thor, below, wasted no time in saving the others. He quickly flew to Odin's side and demanded, "You said she was my sister?" "I have a sister." Thor's face gave a look of defiance, refusing to believe his father's claims, believing the enchanting woman was a wild woman he had kept. "Father, although I love Mother dearly, I am also a man and understand you." Thor, having lived for over 1500 years, certainly couldn't be a novice. The gods of Asgard weren't as all-inclusive as the families next door on Mount Olympus, but they weren't much better. Thor preferred accepting this strange woman as a stepmother to accepting her as a sister. Understanding, Odin gnashed his teeth and suddenly swung a spear, striking his foolish son on the buttocks, savagely declaring, "I'll let you, an idiot, understand, get out." After scolding his foolish son, Odin returned to the battlefield and shouted to Hela, "Slow them down and drive them into the dimension of death. After this battle, I will spare you the punishment." Tisk, Hela scoffed, but she followed Odin's advice and attempted to force the clones into the open wormhole. She, too, had experienced the difficulty of the clones. Chapter 504, The Reinforcements and Plans of Black Praise Digs. In the sky, the god king and princess of Asgard, along with a mad scientist Supreme Evolution, fought off an attack from clones. Down in the ocean, the superheroes aboard the energy lightship were also busy. Grandpa Nick, Kamala Khan, began to speak, but Nick Fury interrupted her. "Call me uncle." The middle school girl suppressed the urge to roll her eyes and, against her conscience, addressed the bald man, born in 1945 and almost 80 years old, twice her father, as uncle. "All right, uncle, I can't hold on any longer." Maintaining the energy lightship required constant power, and a kid unversed in his superpowers couldn't sustain the strain for long. "Let's go to land first, we can't operate at sea," Mr. Fantastic Reed Richards said, turning to his brother-in-law, the Human Torch. "You breathe fire to power the boat." The Human Torch gave him a disdainful glare, but still, he soared into the sky in flames, flew behind the boat, braced his hands on the planking, and streams of flame shot from his legs. Although several sections of New York City, centered around Manhattan, were destroyed by the Sovereign starship's main guns, turning them into a vast ocean, large tracts of land remained throughout New York State. However, the continental plates had been bombarded, disrupting the surrounding geological structure and making them undoubtedly less stable than before. The superheroes from the alternate time and space paid no mind to the future of this time and space. After sprinting across the ocean for half an hour, their energy lightships finally reached land. This was New York's suburban area, where broken roads could still be seen. Even half-destroyed buildings had survived, leaving only half-devastated buildings along the shore. If time allowed this dilapidated structure to still exist a century later, it would surely become a unique sight. Upon reaching shore, Nick Fury pulled a palm-sized metal box from his pocket. After pressing his fingerprint on it, it quickly flipped open, revealing a flip phone with a screen. Black Egg fiddled with the keyboard, entered the coordinates, placed the phone on the ground, and stepped back. Suddenly, a small spiraling point appeared on the phone's casing. Energy surged, and the spiral glowed with yellow and blue light. "This," said Mr. Fantastic Reed, a brilliant scientist, immediately grasped the essence of the situation. The quantum realm, the small device communicating with the quantum realm, lasted only a second before shutting down due to lack of energy. But that second was enough for Nick Fury to transmit a call for help back to his own time and space. I prepared a plan B before I came here. If anything goes wrong, SWORD will send reinforcements. Nick Fury stepped forward and picked up the powerless but still functional flip phone. Haha, this is Tony Stark's patent. I don't think that Widowed Pepper Potts would sell you such an important patent, Reed sneered. Scientists in the capitalist world regard patents as their lifeblood, as they guarantee their wealth. In the capitalist world, lack of money is equivalent to loss of life. In fact, the machine that connects to the quantum realm was invented by Dr. Pim Hanke, a former SHIELD employee. SHIELD also has the right to use the inventions he made during his tenure. Knowing the sensitivity of patents in America, even the spymaster Nick Fury had to argue. However, his reasoning failed to convince fellow scientist Reed. Dr. Hank's machine can only communicate in the quantum realm, but the technology to accurately locate parallel universes belongs only to Stark Industries. If it can't locate them, then no matter how much information you transmit, it's a waste of energy. Nick Fury frowned and retorted, "Are you sure you want to engage in a patent debate with me at this moment?" As the two argued, an Airbus appeared in the sky overhead. The reinforcements summoned by Black Egg had arrived. The plane landed, the hatch opened, and leading the way down the gangway was a black man, wielding a vibranium shield and mechanical wings. It was none other than Sam Wilson, the second-generation Captain America, the Falcon. He was accompanied by Maria Hill, Nick Fury's former assistant, who now coordinated all matters between the Avengers of Earth 616 and the U.S. government. Behind the Black Captain America were Captain Marvel Carol Danvers, Star Mark Kevin Connor, and Hyperion Mark Milton, all blonde and white. Behind them were two other figures with unique features. A man in a suit, clad entirely in black, with only the whites of his eyes visible, was named Roberto da Costa. He was the son of a Brazilian millionaire and nicknamed Sunspot. He was a powerful mutant capable of manipulating solar and sunspot energy. Another figure, clad in kung fu attire and with squinted eyes, was named Su Shang-Chi. Nick Fury had specifically requested that Maria Hill bring Su Shang-Chi with him, having heard that there was an SHIEA in this universe. "Boss, aren't you late?" Maria Hill approached Nick Fury and winked. Nick Fury felt relieved at the signal, knowing that the other party had understood the underlying message. They were now facing a high-level situation. With Su Shang-Chi's ordinary physique, even with the 10 rings, he could only barely contain a single clone, making him a dispensable asset. Nick Fury had specifically instructed Maria Hill to bring Su Shang-Chi with him because his old rival, Zheng Xian, had taken a special interest in this Chinese-American member of the Avengers. The Earth 616 universe also has SHIE, but without the variable of Lin Hao. While it boasts 150,000 agents, its only notable supernatural group is the investiture of the gods, which includes Saber, Weather Witch, Grace Tan, Ravager, and the so-called Monkey King. These are, respectively, a special forces soldier, a weather-controlling psychic, a Chinese-American who manipulates dark energy, a Skrull with Chinese roots, and a gangster with pigtails. With such limited resources, it would be utterly disgraceful, and they have no hope of competing with America. The combined strength of the investiture of the gods is barely enough to give the Hulk a slap on the wrist, and that's the Hulk who's been weakened in the movies, without the angrier, stronger characterization. In other words, most American superheroes are politicized, staying out of the way of international disputes. Otherwise, even with the SHIELD, faced with this situation, Zheng Xian of the Earth 616 universe naturally couldn't sleep, dwelling on how to strengthen SHIER, never passing up a single opportunity. Even a notorious gangster was pardoned and recruited simply for inheriting the Monkey King's legacy, let alone Su Shang-Chi, who grew up in China. While the Avengers are an American superhero organization, they aren't a division of SHIELD. Nor are they affiliated with the American government. Their organizational structure is loose, allowing Avengers to come and go freely as long as they don't harm American interests. This gave Zheng Xian the potential to recruit Su Shang-Chi. Protecting Earth is the same in the Avengers as it is in the conferred gods. However, Zheng Xian didn't know that Su Shang-Chi, despite his yellow skin, harbored a white heart. Perhaps he knew this, but his universe lacked a cloud of Director Lin forcing him to do whatever he could to maintain his position, seizing every opportunity to strengthen Sher. Zheng Xian and Su Shenqi had a previous encounter during the Earth 616 universe's fight against AIM's attempt to dominate Earth. Sher rescued Su Shenqi from the ocean. This marked Sher's first appearance in the Marvel Universe, showcasing its ring fortress and its 150,000 agent surveillance network through the perspective of Sam Wilson, the Falcon. Following this encounter, Zheng Xian mobilized his mole agents within SHIELD to monitor Su Shenqi's every move, hoping to gain a better understanding of this potential target. However, Zheng Xian's actions failed to deceive Nick Fury, who had the advantage of home court. The Black Egg had already seen through Su Shenqi's wickedness and remained silent on the exposed SHIER mole, intending to use it to pass on false information later. Nick Fury specifically requested Su Shenqi's presence to alert the SHIER mole and prompt Zheng Xian to react. I spent some time tonight rereading the Avengers comic book. All the characters in this chapter have appeared in this comic book before. I just borrowed the character settings, which have nothing to do with the plot of the comics. It doesn't matter if you haven't read it. Chapter 505 The Real Strongest in the Avengers. Boss, are you sure SHIELD has the technology to travel through time and space? Maria Hill, as the link between SHIELD and the Avengers, knows the Avengers' daily movements better than Nick Fury. It was she who reported the SHIELD mole's attention to Su Shenqi. So after reading her old boss's request for help, she immediately analyzed a black braised egg plan. The only thing that made her uncertain was whether SHIELD could come to this universe after obtaining the intelligence. If they don't have the ability to come, then wouldn't this operation be like flirting with a blind man? Don't underestimate our opponents. The most difficult process of any technology is to create it from scratch. As long as it is invented in the world, we can always find a way to get it. Nick Fury's eyes were meaningful. Isn't that how they got the technology in their hands? Besides, there's SHIE here too, from other universes. Alright, Maria Hill observed the battle unfolding in the air, shrugged, and said with a relaxed expression, looks like we'll have to fight 2 battles. She was confident, having gathered the strongest Avengers. Aside from the mascot, Sam Wilson, all the others, including Su Shenqi, could fly. The 3 blonde white men and the pitch-black sunspot could also move freely in outer space. Together, these 4 could easily destroy not only nations but also the Earth and even the solar system, should they choose. Beyond this impressive roster, the scheming Black Egg held a final trump card, his old friend's daughter, the Super Skrull, Gaia. If they were ever faced with an inescapable situation, Gaia could combine the superpowers of everyone to create the most powerful warrior. The Skrulls can genetically replicate their targets' bodies, even their memories. Super Skrulls can instantly master their target's abilities, requiring no adaptation period or training. Perhaps the only thing they can't replicate is their heart of strength. Of course, Nick Fury didn't believe the SHIELD alone could corner them. He sought to lure the SHIELD from Earth 616, both to kill and to destroy their hearts. By simultaneously eliminating the SHIELD from both universes, he could show Zheng Xian the difference between them and completely dispel his desire to oppose SHIELD. Perhaps he could even persuade Zheng Xian to turn against him, turning SHIELD into a puppet of the United States. At this moment, Black Egg was unaware of Director Lin's formidable capabilities. Before he could fully grasp the details, he encountered the teleporting apocalypse. With the arrival of reinforcements, Nick Fury no longer considered the clone army and apocalypse seriously. Carol Danvers, from the Earth 616 universe, glanced up at the army of clones in the sky, her brow furrowed in astonishment. Super Skrulls can actually clone. After gazing at the sky, she glanced back at Gaia, who was hiding behind Talus, and shook her head helplessly. As Aunt Carol, having known Gaia for a long time, she couldn't comment on the choice made by Talus and his daughter. Everyone had different values. Let's go. Kevin Connor, nicknamed Star, also known as Star, gazed at the clones in the sky with an eager expression. Finally, a chance to have a proper duel with Sister Carol. He was once an ordinary college student, but after experiencing a white light event, he gained extraordinary powers. Able to harness the star energy within him. This energy comes from the oldest race in the universe, the Constructors, the oldest beings besides the 5 creator gods. This group of constructors created a system called the New Cosmic Structure, Whenever a major evolutionary leap in life occurs in a particular universe, this system automatically emits energy, granting superpowers to 5 creatures on a specific planet. These creatures inherit the titles of Justice, Decoder, Night Mask, and Star, with the occasional addition of a fire-breathing. It's normal for there to be 5 of the 4 heavenly kings. This is the Marvel Universe's white light event. Simply put, an ancient race transfers energy to a backward civilization, creating several superpowered beings, akin to prophets, to help that civilization achieve a life transition. Once the mission is accomplished, the energy is withdrawn. As ancient creatures whose appearance is second only to the 5 creator gods, the constructors are even more powerful than the celestials. They have never been conquered, are virtually immortal, and are the most perfect beings. They are even more powerful than the creator, who created the serpent god Set in the underworld god Sithon. In the New Era storyline, Marvel editors have reimagined the creator as Reed Richards, a man from the Ultimate Universe who traveled back in time 4 billion years. Yes, that rubber man. He might not be able to shift into 5th gear, but he's the father of the sun god. In short, star power is incredibly powerful. Kevin Connor, fresh off acquiring it, could easily send the Hulk flying into space and easily handle a combined attack from the Hulk, Hyperion, and Thor. Hearing the imp's words, Carol turned away, ignoring him. After joining the Avengers, the imp, relying on his powerful star power, constantly challenged the older members. But aside from her, Hyperion, Sunspot, the Hulk, and Thor, who could hold their own for a while, only the resolute Captain America could hold their own for a few rounds. The others simply couldn't hold their own. While the unstoppable members enjoyed some free time, the more capable members were constantly harassed by the imp, constantly pestering them for battles under the pretext of learning from each other. Carol, after unleashing her dual star power, held out the longest, and this became Kevin Connor's target. He constantly visited her every time she returned to Earth, forcing her to visit less frequently. If the communicator she'd left for Nick Fury hadn't gone off, Carol wouldn't have returned. Hearing his words, Hyperion, without waiting for Kevin Connor to shift his frantic gaze, immediately took to the air. He'd rather fight the clones, because they were clearly weaker than Carol. Hyperion, whose real name was Mark Milton, appeared frequently in the comics, with various backgrounds. Simply put, he was a character Marvel borrowed from Superman's design. His abilities were similar to his, but his versions weren't as numerous, and his ceiling was that of a standard Superman. If you have the strength, use it on the enemy. Carol glanced at Kevin Connor and soared into the sky as well. Kevin Connor hurriedly caught up, grinning. Then let's see who can destroy the most enemies. After the 3 main forces took to the sky, the remaining yellow-skinned and black-skinned characters exchanged glances and took off as well. As the mascot, Sam Wilson couldn't just sit back and watch his teammates charge forward while he hid behind, so he unfolded his metal wings. Unexpectedly, Nick Fury called out, "Captain, why don't you pay attention to that guy next to you?" Following the direction of the black marinated egg's finger, Sam Wilson spotted the real captain, Steve Rogers, shrouded in a sea of blood. "Captain Rogers is here." Sam was stunned, but then realized, which universe is he from? "You'll have to ask." Nick Fury feigned indifference. With Captain America's strength, he couldn't even withstand a punch from his clone. It would be better to use him as a waste and test this clearly abnormal Steve Rogers. I spent a lot of time researching the settings. Obviously, I'm not a Marvel fan. Before writing this book, I had only seen the movies and TV series, and I had only read bits and pieces of the comics from fanfiction and reader reviews. It was only for this book that I thoroughly read Avengers, Age of Ultron and Legend of the Shield, which dealt with the Spear organization. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 506 Su Shenki, I need to work harder to get recognition from my teammates. The arrival of reinforcements instantly turned the tide of the aerial battle. Carol Danvers, from the Earth 616 universe, stood out the most, as she possessed the most advanced understanding of her abilities, and her Captain Marvel, undiminished from her previous weakening, was already stronger than her counterparts in other universes. Furthermore, the clones' brains were incomplete, making them less than true Super Skrulls. Even if the clones replicated their abilities, their performance would be weaker than the originals. While this difference might be insignificant when targeting weaker opponents, it became a crucial chasm against opponents of equal rank. Carol soared into the air, unleashing her binary power, pinpointing her enemy's weakness and blasting a single blow. The clones' glassy eyes and expressionless faces made it clear they weren't real, undoubtedly reducing the Avengers' already limited psychological burden. Seeing Carol's prowess, Star Kevin Connor screamed, "Ms. Danvers, did you hold back on me before?" Even with his full-strength star energy, he couldn't even punch a child. Idiot. These clones' abilities are all from Carol. Of course, I know their weaknesses better. Hyperion, standing nearby, had just fired 2 atomic beams from his eyes, forcing a clone back. Any weaknesses? Kevin Connor asked, his expression awash in curiosity. To avoid contracting the idiot virus, Hyperion refused to stay with the man and flew away. A little further away, Sunspot Roberto da Costa and Sue Shenki were each battling a clone. The pitch-black Sunspot was more composed, his body brimming with black bubbles, absorbing the clone's photon energy like a black hole. This mutant, utterly black from the outside in, could absorb and control solar energy, using it for flight, releasing heat to alter the temperature of objects, and unleashing light attacks. Because Apocalypse didn't dare allow the clone to replicate his abilities, the clone's primary strength came from Carol's, with the abilities of the other mutants being largely negligible. After the photon energy was absorbed, the clone's speed, strength, and defense were reduced to third-rate, completely unfit for this high-level battle. Taking advantage of the clone's loss of energy and sluggish reflexes, Sunspot hooded the surrounding air, instantly reaching its ignition point. With a bang, the clone ignited. Seeing his teammates' easy victory, Sue Shenki could only smile wryly. If it weren't for the 10 rings he inherited from his dead father, his limited martial arts skills wouldn't have been enough to participate in such a high-level battle. He lost his focus for a moment, and was struck by another fist from the clone, sending him plummeting towards the sea below. With everyone else busy and no one paying attention, Sue Shenki could only hastily adjust the position of the 10 rings, clumsily manipulating their divine power, emitting golden energy blasts to offset the force of his fall. After gliding briefly above the sea, Sue Shenki finally regained his flight. Looking up at the sky, he saw his teammates diligently killing the enemy. Banana Man hypnotized himself. Everyone's busy, I should work harder too, to earn my comrades' recognition. Go for it. If Little Devil could bring the fox-faced, orange-haired imp over, he'd probably empathize with Sue Shenki and have a lot in common. Because they all need the bond of their teammates. Even if my teammates don't care about me. Even if my leader just wants to use me, so what? As long as I keep working hard, I'll definitely change everyone's perspective. The new Avengers easily dispatched the clones, and Odin, from across the battlefield, cast a puzzled look at them. Where did all this come from? Hela, though a battle-mad, was no fool. Noticing the sudden appearance of a group of powerful strangers on the battlefield, she instantly changed her mind. With a swing of her sword, she forced back a clone, then withdrew, hiding at the edge to fish. While Asgard doesn't have the saying while the snipe and the clam fight, the fisherman benefits, Hela understood the same principle. Interesting, the Supreme Evolutionary, standing nearby, immediately stared down at the Airbus parked on the distant shore. He had a hunch that this seemingly ordinary aircraft must possess time travel technology. It made no sense. A plane that couldn't even leave the solar system possessed technology capable of traveling through time and space, while his own vehicle could traverse galaxies yet couldn't even enter the quantum realm. Watching his clones being eliminated one by the newly arrived warriors, the Supreme Evolutionary withdrew from the battlefield. He hadn't come to Earth to fight in the first place, but to obtain the technology to connect parallel universes. Had it not been for Apocalypse's mindless attack, the Supreme Evolutionary would have long since retreated to the surface of the sea to study the portal. Seeing him withdraw, Odin, after a moment's reflection, also flew off on his Pegasus to the edge. His Majesty the God King needed to be wary of the Supreme Evolutionary and these new arrivals. This left only the true captain, Steve Rogers, fighting tooth and nail on the battlefield. However, the true captain also encountered someone who approached him. "Hey, Captain," Sam Wilson, soaring into the sky on metallic wings, came running over to greet him with a familiar air. Steve was relentlessly pursuing Apocalypse. After taking a piercing blow from the Eternal Spear, Apocalypse's condition deteriorated considerably. The gaping hole in his chest hadn't healed, and the defensive force field he had created had become as thin as paper, repeatedly shattered by Steve's bloody hand. Apocalypse looked utterly devastated, but Steve's condition wasn't much better either. While his magic arts had given him enough strength to rival the mightiest in the universe, they also placed a severe strain on his body and mind. The zombie virus extract within him constantly fueled a mental hunger, which he barely managed to balance with his immense willpower. Whenever he practiced or activated his magic, he had to simultaneously fend off two different mental assaults. This prevented the real captain from being able to sustain his magic arts. Although his ability to maintain these abilities increased with his increasing willpower, he ultimately failed to achieve the yin-yang state envisioned by Lin Hao, unable to eliminate a mental burden. Steve, his eyes red, stubbornly resisted the dual mental assaults. As the battle dragged on, seeing the clones constantly rushing to protect Apocalypse, the ineffective battle inevitably grew irritable, adding to his mental burden. Now, a fool had approached him, causing the real captain to become even more agitated. "Leave me alone," the real captain turned and shouted at Sam Wilson. Captain America, the mascot flying nearby, was startled. He noticed Steve's crimson eyes, his smile instantly fading. He said sternly, "You're not Captain Rogers." "Absolutely not." Those crimson eyes filled Sam with unease and fear, a sinister aura. How could his bright and majestic captain possibly possess such an aura? Chapter 507 Nick Fury, the Wise Man. Seeing the real captain distracted, Apocalypse immediately unleashed two blasts of heat energy, one at Steve Rogers and the other at Sam Wilson. Captain America, the mascot, hastily raised his vibranium shield, but was still knocked back by the overwhelming kinetic energy. Steve, however, controlled a crimson cloud to shield himself, absorbing the heat energy. However, Steve, reaching his limit, forced a final burst of willpower, transforming the sea of blood into a vortex that swept towards Apocalypse like a storm. Seeing his opponent's ultimate attack, Apocalypse quickly commanded several clones to fly in to protect him. However, this vortex of blood was actually the manifestation of magical power, naturally imbued with magical properties and capable of absorbing energy. Several clones, shrouded in colorful light, entered the vortex, their photon energy rapidly dissipating. As they realized the danger and attempted to flee, the vortex unleashed the same pulling force as a normal vortex, crushing the clones like a meat grinder. The energy absorbed by the magic naturally feeds back to the host, but Steve had no desire for anything that wasn't his own. The more alien energy he absorbed, the less refined his internal strength became. While it might seem like a temporary surge of strength, the final step proved infinitely more difficult. In previous battles, Steve would absorb the enemy's energy, but never incorporate it into his own body, using it as a one-off attack. This tactic of fighting back in kind was quite effective. The absorption itself weakened the enemy, and then the massive explosion of absorbed energy was unleashed all at once, overwhelming most opponents. But now, Steve was on the verge of collapse. Faced with the overwhelming force of the sea of blood, he had no energy to resist, he was thrust into it. No, the powerful impact caused Steve to spit out a mouthful of blood, and he immediately fell unconscious, plummeting downwards. His luck was both good and bad. Fortunately, he'd lost consciousness, temporarily shielded from the demonic influence. Unfortunately, this place was over 5 kilometers above the ground. Without any protective gear, if Steve plummeted down like that, even a collision with the sea would shatter his bones. If he landed head first, he'd be greeted by a red and white mass of filth. Mr. Rogers. Mr. Rogers, Jarvis's anxious voice echoed from the satellite server. It immediately launched all of the satellite's remaining drones, attempting to support Steve's falling body. At that moment, a helicarrier suddenly appeared in the sky, appearing abruptly and without a trace. This helicarrier was several times smaller than the sky headquarters previously used by SHIELD, and its two engines were still propeller type, the same model Tony Stark had once encountered. It was clearly inferior to SHIELD's current equipment. A circular emblem depicting a spear was engraved on the helicarrier's hull. "Look, they're coming." Nick Fury turned to Maria Hill beside him with a confident smile. "This aerospace carrier belongs to the SHIEA from the Earth 616 universe." Inside the mothership's command room, as the measuring instruments activated and compiled the data on the sun's altitude, gravitational pull, and land surface scan patterns, the operators immediately expressed astonishment. "Director, our destination is off." where over North America, Zheng Xian, seated in the command seat, frowned slightly, but didn't dwell on it. After all, this was their first time traveling through space and time using an aerospace carrier. Previously, they had only conducted single-person and vehicle-based experiments, so minor errors were to be expected. As a matter of course, any experiment should proceed step by step. After conducting time and space travel with people on a bus, they should then conduct unmanned experiments using large transport aircraft, and then manned experiments. The reason for bringing such a large team and taking such a risk wasn't just because of Su Shanqi. While Zheng Xian from the Earth 616 universe hadn't seen the world like Zheng Xian from the base universe and understood the truth of the Marvel universe, he wasn't so superficial as to risk the fate of SHIEA over a single transcendent. Nick Fury's supposed conspiracy clearly reflects his own biased view of Zheng Xian, who he perceived as superficial. Zheng Xian's arrival stemmed from intelligence from a SHIELD insider that Maria Hill had led several powerful Avengers to 1939. Fearing that the Black Ghost might harm China at that time, Zheng Xian hurriedly set out, bringing all the members of the Fengtian, Seal of Gods, with him. Ever since Tony Stark invented time travel technology, the major powers of Earth 616 have pounced like sharks on the threat. With Thanos' forces returning to Earth once more, the complexities of parallel universes and time travel are undeniable. Furthermore, the Avenger saviors have differing perspectives. They were allies during the alien invasion, but once the crisis is resolved, they will inevitably face inquiries from various governments. They must explain why Thanos' forces returned, how the other half of life was able to return, and the methods employed by the Avengers. Aside from Steve Rogers, who journeyed to 1970 to rekindle their past, each of the Avengers who participated in Endgame has someone they care about left on Earth. Ant-Man and the Wasp need to protect Hank and company, Thor needs to secure the settlement allocated to Asgardians, and Pepper Potts, whose husband has died, needs to protect the Stark family estate. With so many obstacles in the way, how could the various governments fail to grasp the secret of time travel technology? While Pepper Potts maintains a fierce defense, resolutely protecting her late husband's patents, she secretly allows Nick Fury to obtain the technology. As long as the secret isn't known to a single person, a well-established national team will undoubtedly find a way to acquire it. The only question is the cost. However, any sane and capable government would be unmoved by this technology, capable of traveling to alternate time and space and acquiring greater resources. America, in the Earth 616 universe, held out for a while, but finding it untenable, led the five major powers in formulating the Space-Time Development Treaty. This stipulated that any time travel by any nation possessing the technology must be registered with a committee. It also prohibited travel to time periods after the emergence of humanity, and those seeking to extract resources could only go back to ancient times. Driven solely by the pursuit of wealth, the five major powers were reluctant to venture into a time period where human civilization had already developed, as this would have required managing relations with the indigenous peoples and could easily lead to time-space conflict and even war. Since other time periods might also harbor superpowers, it was preferable to return to Earth, a time before humanity emerged, which was much easier. Furthermore, the technology still had a long way to go from development to practical application. Because America was the first to master the mature technology and controlled the supply of the critical resource, PIM particles, it became the largest player. Any nation or power seeking to master the technology had to purchase PIM particles from America at exorbitant prices. America reaped enormous profits from the experiments conducted during the development of the technology and from each subsequent time travel, allowing it to reap the lion's share until the production of PIM particles was mastered. Despite knowing they were being exploited, other nations, driven by the desire to master this unlimitedly lucrative technology, gritted their teeth and purchased PIM particles from the United States, using every possible means to obtain intelligence on the technology. Now, the SHIELD in the Earth 616 universe has become the second force to possess the technology. Upon discovering SHIELD's violation of the treaty, they naturally pursued it. Chapter 508, What level are we at to compete with others? Director Zheng, rushing over here like this is clearly courting death. The so-called Monkey King, sporting a dreadlocked pigtail, sat cross-legged on the sofa, sipping a glass of red wine and teasing Zheng Xian. They have Captain Marvel, Star Bear, Hyperion, and Sunspot. Even the weakest Falcon would rank in the middle of our pack. How can we even compete with them? As soon as he spoke, Grace Tan and the Ravager both expressed deep agreement. The Weather Witch, the team leader, stood by, frowning but unable to utter a word of rebuttal. After all, the two sides were so powerful that even if they combined their might, Hyperion would easily annihilate them. Furthermore, the Monkey King, Sun Wukong, was originally a gangster. Zheng Xian had coerced and bribed him into ignoring his past crimes, even offering his gang some advantages to launder their crimes through legitimate business, thus allowing him to be accepted into the Fengshan, investiture of the gods. Ravager is a Skrull who once invaded China. Unsuccessfully captured and dismembered, he was forced to agree to stay and help the Chinese, under the pretext of becoming interstellar friends with Zheng Xian. He's practically powerless, relying solely on a suit of armor, a cheap imitation of the Iron Man armor from the Great Mao Dynasty, that must be recharged with a thick cable before each battle. Another Banana Man is even more impressive. Grace Tan is an activist who has been arrested 3 times for illegal protests, aiding a hacker conspiracy, and other charges, all for exposing corruption. She was imprisoned in a special cell to isolate her powers until the Weather Witch offered her a chance to join the God-making team. She agreed, proposing she help those who support her and inflame those who oppose her, expecting such a bunch of scumbags to develop a sense of national identity and die for their compatriots? Forget it. The only normal member is Saber, but he's a normal person without any superpowers. For now, all he could do was stand behind Zheng Xian and glare at the group of superpowered individuals, his anger tinged with a deep sense of resentment and hatred for injustice. How could such a bunch of idiots possess superpowers? And yet these loyal and fearless warriors lack the strength to stand up to such a formidable foe? Zheng Xian's eyes narrowed slightly in the command seat, a hint of coldness gleaming in them, but after a moment, he managed to calm them down, returning to a gentle smile as he turned around. Don't worry, we won't fight them. As if to mask the anger in his eyes, Zheng Xian narrowed his eyes, turning them into his typical narrowed eyes. I came here simply to remind SHIELD and the Avengers not to forget the Space-Time Exploitation Treaty. The Avengers are not an American government agency, but a group of peace-loving people. They will most likely not harm the natives of this time and space. When one lacks strength, one can only endure, and even in the face of potential harm, one must compromise and seek peace, because the power to fight is simply unattainable. Zheng Xian can only place his hope in the kindness of the Avengers. He will lead the SHIELD warriors to stand guard over the Pacific Ocean, using his flesh and blood to build a fragile wall for their homeland. That's best. The so-called Monkey King tipped his head back, downing the precious red wine he'd specifically requested SHIE prepare. He sneered, let's be frank, you can be gatekeepers, but don't expect us to actually fight the Avengers. If the situation gets out of hand, we don't care what you do, but this mothership must be ours. We'll immediately activate the equipment and return to this universe. Grace Tan and the Devastator agreed again. Zheng Xian, still maintaining his narrowed eyes and gentle smile, was forced to nod. Of course, the agreement won't change. In the command room, the other SHIE agents were either suppressing their anger or becoming numb. Although the Fengshan Group was founded by SHIE and funded by its own funds, they remained independent, possessing even more freedom than company employees. It was their own weakness. Director, look, someone has landed on the flight deck, the observer reported quickly, breaking the tense atmosphere. The unconscious real Captain Steve Rogers was caught by the suddenly appearing SHIE mothership. He tumbled several times on the flight deck before crashing into a fixed iron crate and coming to a stop. Zheng Xian was about to send someone to retrieve the victims when a clone swooped down from the sky overhead at breakneck speed. Enemy attack! The SHIE soldiers, standing by the radar, shouted a warning. Fuck. How did you fly this plane? The so-called Monkey King Sun Wukong leaped to his feet and yelled, you're actually on the battlefield, we're soldiers. Saber finally couldn't help but roar, soldiers belong on the battlefield. These Fengshan guys were no strangers to battle, they'd fought against the Hand and the Gorgon before. If it were just gangsters, or even just ordinary supervillains, they'd be willing to take on them, due to their agreement and the generous rewards offered by SHIE. But what kind of people were they? How could they compare to what they saw before them? This was an American superhero. You're blind, the so-called Monkey King shouted angrily. This man's aura is clearly the same as Ms. Marvel's Carol. What are you fighting for? Fight with your life, nothing less than a fight to the death, Saber roared, drawing a chorus of enthusiastic responses from his comrades. Fight to the death, ha, ha ha, ha 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 ha. The gangster sneered, then burst into laughter. Alright, go fight, go die. He immediately turned to Zheng Xian and demanded, isn't it time to fulfill the agreement we just agreed on? If you don't retreat, we will. Zheng Xian's narrowed eyes suddenly opened, and he gazed calmly at the gangster, yet a terrifying aura emanated from him. The so-called Monkey King was just a lucky little thug. How could he have witnessed the rage and murderous intent of a seasoned warrior? Zheng Xian's calm gaze forced him back a few steps, stumbling and nearly falling. He instantly erupted in anger. Zheng Xian, don't make me fight. How could someone like you possess the power of the Monkey King? It's truly unfair. For the greater good, Zheng Xian avoided a confrontation, but Saber, regardless, voiced his inner questions on behalf of his superiors and fellow comrades. As soon as he spoke, Saber was prepared to be used by Zheng Xian to appease his wrath. He also understood the difficulties faced by the Divine Spear Bureau. Fall behind, and you'll be beaten. I got it, so what? The gangster pulled his golden cudgel from his ear and slammed it against the metal floor. He looked around and glared, if you don't agree, let's fight. Enough. The Weather Witch, the team leader, spoke quickly. That man outside is clearly after the victims on deck. Let's hand them over and withdraw from the battlefield to make our stance clear. This will avoid a fight. With that, he flew out. But before she could even begin to clean up her own business, the clones flying from the sky suddenly stopped mid-air, as if controlled by some mysterious force. Apocalypse, having ordered the clones to pursue Steve, suddenly looked up and finally saw the mastermind he'd been waiting for. Unfortunately, it wasn't dark, but rather white. It was a pristine white auspicious cloud. In the next chapter, I'll fulfill my promise to my brothers and have the original Monkey King slay this so-called Monkey King with his pigtails. I'll be working through the night to finish this. Chapter 509, What level are you? Are you worthy of using my name, old son? Originally, Lin Hao hadn't planned to make his entrance so soon, but who could have imagined the SHIE Bureau from another universe suddenly appeared. Seeing the clone about to blow a hole in the SHIE's helicarrier, Director Lin had no choice but to arrive early. A vast auspicious cloud obscured the sunlight, dimming it slightly. Above the auspicious cloud, a majestic palace stood, its walls jade-like and glazed tiles adorned with dragons and phoenixes dancing. In front of the multi-story palace, 2 rows of armored generals stood, each man supporting the beams and supporting the pillars. Giant dragons and unicorns even prostrated themselves on the ground. 4 figures stood at the foot of the South Heavenly Gate, the great sage wielding a staff, the true lord carrying a sword, and in the center, a man in a white coat and a man in a shirt. You told me you were going to make such a big scene. I'd change into something respectable. Zheng Xian glared at Lin Hao. You look good in anything, Lin Hao replied, half-heartedly. As soon as he spotted the SHIE's helicarrier, he immediately returned to his base universe and fetched Zheng Xian to avoid any difficulties in convincing the SHIE Bureau from another universe. They're struggling to operate a mothership, while you're just building a celestial palace. It wouldn't be a good match, and your colleagues from another dimension, already terrified of poverty, wouldn't believe it. The sudden appearance of the celestial palace not only shocked the SHIELD crew aboard the helicarrier, but also caused the fighting between the various factions to cease. Apocalypse collected all the remaining dozen or so clones and surrounded himself. On land, Nick Fury was stunned for a moment, then turned to Mike and shouted, "Binoculars! Give me a telescope." His confidence was suddenly met with a palpitation. He'd experienced this feeling many times in his more than half-century spy career, each one a life-or-death crisis. Mike, the current director of SHIELD, wouldn't go around wearing binoculars, but he couldn't disobey his boss's orders. After a moment of hesitation, he suddenly noticed the sunglasses perched on Melinda May's nose. "May, your sunglasses seem to have farsightedness, don't they?" The latter had clearly seen the scene above the clouds, and muttered foolishly, "How can it be impossible?" Mike snatched the sunglasses away and handed them to Nick Fury with both hands. "Boss, these sunglasses have farsightedness." Before he could finish, Nick Fury couldn't wait to grab them and put them on. After Black Egg saw the scene above the clouds clearly, he was silent for a long time, and suddenly cried out in surprise, "Impossible. Absolutely impossible. Why are they Chinese? Why are they all yellow-skinned? Even if there are no correct black skins, there should be great white-skinned fathers. How does this work?" Rubberman Reed Richards broke out his scientist nature, puzzled. How can there be a palace in the clouds? How can people stand on it? That's not scientific at all. He didn't consider whether it was scientific that his son was born with the superpower of creating the universe. Jonathan, fly up and help me see if they're real. If that palace is real. Jonathan Stone, the Human Torch, rolled his eyes at him and said angrily, "Are you okay? These guys look tough. What if something happens if I fly over there?" None of the American superheroes present knew Lin Hao or who was SHIEAD. Those who did were either in a coma, missing, or dead. The guys from Earth 616 had never seen Lin Hao before. But they would soon get to know him better. Lin Hao didn't even glance at them. He simply reached out to the helicarrier below and hauled the massive craft up into the clouds. The landing was so gentle and steady that everyone aboard barely felt a jolt before noticing the dramatic change in their surroundings. "Director Zheng Xian, we are SHIAD members from another universe. Please come out and talk." Lin Hao's voice was soft, but it carried clearly to everyone aboard the helicarrier. At that moment, in the command room, Zheng Xian spotted the 4 men at the South Heaven Gate. He first caught sight of his alter ego, then his gaze was drawn to the Monkey King wielding the golden cudgel, the most striking figure. This monkey, Zheng Xian stared in disbelief. Could it be? He couldn't believe it, but the palace in the distance looked unmistakably like the mythical heavenly palace. Anyone with even a passing understanding of traditional culture would immediately think of the heavenly palace upon seeing a palace complex perched high in the clouds. Haha, this guy's actually impersonating the Monkey King. The gangster laughed to mask his panic. Honestly, compared to the monkey he'd found in the cave, this one more closely matched the Chinese fantasy of the great sage. But he absolutely wouldn't admit it. If the monkey before him was the great sage, wouldn't his inheritance be a joke? Dare to impersonate my master? I'll kill you first. The creature, quicker than Zheng Xian, darted out of the aerospace carrier, transformed into an eagle, clutching his golden cudgel in its talons. It flapped its wings and flew to the South Heaven Gate, then transformed back into human form. He danced a few times with his long staff and shook his head, his long, rat-tail braid glaring. "Hey! You imposter! How dare you pretend to be my master?" Lin Hao didn't bother to exchange another word with the gangster. He turned to the great sage and said, "Great sage, do you know this man is also called Sun Wukong, also known as the Monkey King? What rank is he? Is he worthy of using my name?" The great sage sneered. "Please, great sage, smack this disgusting bug to death," Lin Hao said coldly. "No need to ask. I'll clean up the mess myself." The great sage stepped forward, raised his staff, and swung it down hard. The gangster was completely unable to react. Faced with a thunderous blow, his face pale and legs trembling with fear. Perhaps it was a blessing from heaven, but in fact it was just the great sage's playful nature. The staff stopped just before the gangster's head, and the great sage retracted it. The thug, having narrowly escaped death, fell to the ground in fear. "Stinky bug, since you dare to use my name, why don't you make a bet with me?" the great sage jokingly said. "If you can win, I'll spare your life." Lin Hao glanced over and suddenly realized something. The great sage raised his right palm and said, "I'll make a bet with you. If you have the ability, you can somersault out of this right palm of mine. You win, and there's no need to fight anymore." Lin Hao smiled, and Yang Jian rolled his eyes. The gangster, claiming to be his favorite, naturally knew this story. He immediately shouted angrily, "I can fly thousands of miles with a somersault. And I think I'm the Tathagata Buddha, do you dare or not?" The Monkey King challenged him. "Are you afraid of losing? Let's bet." The gangster leaped up, then sneered at the Monkey King, "I'm just afraid I can't hold my hairy claws. Haha, watch." With that, the Monkey King soared out of the South Heaven Gate, using the power of heaven and earth to transform into a gigantic figure. With his feet on the sea, his head overhead, the surging waters formed a tsunami that rushed towards the land. "Run!" Thunderbolt was the first to soar into the sky. Franklin Richards, backed by his father's side, once again created an independent space, protecting the remaining group. Watching the huge wave approach, the superheroes once again realized their own insignificance. When the wave passed, they saw the huge figure again, and their hearts were shaken. "You're kidding?" Nick Fury's face suddenly paled. "Come on," the great sage shouted at the gangster, his voice thunderous. Terrified, yet knowing he couldn't escape, the gangster's aggressive nature was aroused, and he somersaulted into the great sage's palm. "All right, then, watch me." With a puff, the great sage clenched his fist, and a cloud of blood erupted. What level are you? Are you worthy of making the same bed as me? Haha, the great sage has learned bad habits, Lin Hao laughed. This monkey is becoming more and more reckless. Returning to his true nature, Yang Jian shook his head and smiled. Since arriving in this world, the great sage has completely escaped the schemes of the Buddha and the Jade Emperor. 500 years of suppressed nature have been released, which is a good thing. As a friend willing to help him conceal his true nature, Yang Jian, despite his expression, was also happy. The Monkey King, who crushed the bedbugs, washed his hands in the sea with his body, which caused huge waves and shocked the superheroes. Chapter 510 The Great Sage appears, and the heroes are shocked. A giant, 1,000 feet tall, frolicked in the Atlantic Ocean, stirring up immense waves. The superheroes in their isolated space felt wave after wave of shock. This, Nick Fury murmured weakly, is this their Sun Wukong? If Zheng Xian could obtain intelligence on the Avengers, then Nick Fury could certainly obtain information on all the members of the Fengshan. He had once given considerable attention to this extraordinary group controlled by a potential enemy government, but after learning their detailed background, Black Brazen Egg no longer cared much. They were incompetent and full of trouble. Even if they were put together, they couldn't defeat any of the top fighters of the Avengers. They were nothing more than a mob. The so-called Monkey King claimed to have the power of an ancient god, but with a single somersault he could only fly 500 kilometers. Carol didn't even need to reach light speed for Hyperion to crush him. A broken stick, while adjustable in length, could deliver a blow no match for Thor's hammer, let alone the Hulk's fist. The so-called 72 transformations ultimately meant only transforming into animals. Even after transforming, he couldn't place his golden cudgel, he had to hold it in his claws, otherwise it would fall. Such a jerk was the strongest fighter in the conferred gods group, so why should Nick Fury care? But now, seeing the savage giant with the ocean under his feet and the sky overhead, Black Salted Egg finally realized what the true Monkey King was like. The Avengers, who had stopped fighting in the air, flew together. Hyperion, observing the Monkey King's magical power, looked solemnly. His body is as massive as the Celestials, but he gives me an even more terrifying feeling than them. We don't need to fight him, do we? Su Shuang asked in a trembling voice, his heart filled with anxiety. He had, of course, read the story of Havoc in Heaven as a child, but at the time, he thought it was just a story. As he grew older, he encountered more and more things, even seeing dragons, and gradually realized that the gods of myth and legend once existed. After the so-called Monkey King appeared, the SHIE Bureau didn't conceal his existence. Su Shenki himself had once fought alongside him against a dragon summoned by Gorgon. However, upon meeting this Monkey King descendant with a golden pigtail, Su Shenki's childhood fantasies about the Monkey King vanished, and he ultimately convinced himself to pursue beauty. Look at the Monkey King in traditional culture, weak and ugly. How can he compare to him? Is such a rotten culture worth inheriting and promoting? Pursue beauty is the right path. I did nothing wrong. But now that he finally saw the real Monkey King, he felt only fear, not much regret. Otherwise, he wouldn't have immediately worried about becoming an enemy and placing himself in opposition to the Monkey King. Banana people are always more proactive than white people. Why fight them? Kevin Connor, a university student, but not an elite one, and certainly not required to take political science classes, was bewildered. That helicarrier just now seemed to belong to SHIELD. Were all Earthlings, and they were not evil villains seeking to rule Earth. Why fight? The other Avengers fell silent at this remark. Hyperion, a member of the same eternal race as Thanos, possessed a high IQ, exceptional knowledge, and a profound understanding of both the natural world and the humanities. He rolled his eyes at this remark. Sunspot, born into a Brazilian millionaire family and enjoying an elite education, remained silent upon hearing this, his dark face unable to discern a single change of expression. Captain Marvel, Carol, hadn't understood much of this on Earth, but after being brainwashed by the Kree's supreme intelligence, she had been indoctrinated with knowledge. She simply didn't want to use it, but she understood it. Su Shenki understood it even better. Thanks to his compulsory education, he understood not only the conflicts between nations but also the class conflicts that these white people hadn't learned about. But now, he could only offer a wry smile, not daring to speak openly. Let's wait and see. As long as they don't target us, the America of this time and space, we won't take action. Carol was used to being the leader, and the other Avengers were quite respectful of her, At least more so than the masked Captain America, who lay sprawled on the ground and couldn't get up. The great sage washed the blood from his hands. Seeing that the superheroes, aliens, and Apocalypse hadn't reacted, he retracted his magical powers and flew back to the South Heaven Gate. Meanwhile, Zheng Xian from the Earth 616 universe had disembarked from the helicarrier with a saber and a group of curious SHIE agents, arriving before the Celestial Palace in the clouds. Oh my god. It's really white clouds. It's really the Celestial Palace. The SHIE agents fought to suppress their excitement, but their joy was unstoppable. The white clouds, the palace's soaring eaves, the soaring dragons and phoenixes, all told them exactly where they were. The palace of Asgard, the temples on Mount Olympus, the heavens of Jesus Christ would never use these Chinese elements. This was the Celestial Palace of myth and legend. We finally have our own gods. We finally have our own confidence. Those who have not experienced the difficult development process of the SHIED over the years will never be able to empathize. In this Marvel universe, which has both technology and magic and divine power, the SHIED not only has to withstand the technological blockade of the West, but also has to withstand the tremendous pressure from the extraordinary. It's not that there is really no one to use, so why should they be humble to a gangster? As for letting a social activist into the house? Need to make friends with an alien invader? It's all because of poverty, the kind of poverty that comes from the lack of extraordinary people. Now they have finally found their own mythical heaven. Zheng Xian walked over quickly, wanting to reach out to the other Zheng Xian, but he couldn't figure out his relationship with Lin Hao, because the three-eyed man looked very much like the Erlang Shen in the myth, but now he deliberately lagged behind Lin Hao half a step, highlighting Lin Hao's uniqueness. Who are you? We're also from the Divine Spear Bureau, from another universe. Lin Hao saw his hesitation, as well as the anticipation of his colleagues from another time and space, but he still spoke frankly. This heavenly palace isn't the real one. It's an knockoff I created, huh? As expected, many of his colleagues from another time and space couldn't help but express disappointment. Lin Hao simply smiled. The heavenly palace may be fake, but the Monkey King and Erlang Shen are real, huh? The Monkey King and Yang Jian echoed his sentiments. If you saw the heavenly palace in this universe, you'd think it was inferior to this knockoff of mine. At this, Lin Hao let out a meaningful smile, and I believe you'll all see it soon. With this, Lin Hao handed the reception to Zheng Xian. He would take his colleagues from another time and space to learn about the depths of the Divine Spear Bureau in the base universe. As for the remaining social activists and alien friends within the Fengshan group, now frozen by Lin Hao's immobilization technique, the future course of events will fall to Zheng Xian of the Earth 616 universe. After receiving aid, these individuals have lost their value, and Zheng Xian, unyielding, will see them through to their proper end. The Zheng Xians of the two universes are essentially the same, their fates differing. If the Zheng Xian of the base universe hadn't encountered Director Lin, he would have followed the same path. As the battlefield quieted, Supreme Evolution headed for the portal he'd longed for, and Rubberman Reed Richards joined him. Chapter 511 Why don't we have Director Lin? Lin Hao opened a portal to the base universe within the palace behind the South Heavenly Gate. Zheng Xian then led a group of colleagues from another time and space through the portal to his own universe, where he showcased SHIE's wealth. Since Director Lin joined, SHIE's resources have grown. Our super soldier serum is even better than the one created by Abraham Orkins. While we can't create a special case like Steve Rogers, anyone can use it without any side effects. The extremis virus has also been conquered by the technical development department. We have two versions, Dragon Flame and Killin Fire, and there's also a magical fruit that allows people to transform into dragons and Killins, gaining their powers. Yes, all of these can be mass-produced. As many as you want. Zheng Xian's face remained calm, but the smile in his eyes couldn't be concealed. Showing off is satisfying, but showing off in front of his alternate self is even more satisfying. But these are just the basics. You can get them once you join the field department and pass the review. Zheng Xian waved his hand, looking relaxed. The colleagues from the alternate universe were all speechless. Oh, you're asking if there's a nano-armor? Zheng Xian immediately let out a look of disdain. Everyone has one of those things, it's our uniform. No, I didn't ask, the other Zheng Xian mentally complained. If the armor didn't have the ability to automatically change color and adjust the temperature, I'd want to get spring and autumn and winter and summer versions for everyone, Zheng Xian added, boasting. Seeing the boss remain silent, Saber from the Earth 616 universe effectively filled in the gaps, asking, "That would require a lot of resources, right?" "Hey, what a coincidence." Zheng Xian immediately took over, speaking again with a nonchalant air. Director Lin built a spaceship, and on his first trip out of the city, he defeated the Kree Empire and seized the resources they'd accumulated over millions of years. The other Zheng Xian quietly glared at Saber. What a joke. These are nothing to mention, the real good stuff is yet to come. Zheng Xian then led them to the supernormal library, which contained a vast collection of books, from basic internal cultivation techniques and the 6 naval styles to methods for cultivating magic and spiritual power, as well as the secret manuals of immortal arts and Taoist techniques provided by the great sage and Yang Jian after their arrival. Director Lin, though a torturous mouth, was truly generous with his own people and never held back. He would pass on anything he learned that could be shared. This, Zheng Xian, from the Earth 616 universe, marveled for a long time before finally uttering a complete sentence. Can all this knowledge grant one supernormal powers? While ordinary SHIE agents might prioritize the immediate effects of serums and fruits, only a head of a family like Zheng Xian could understand the value of this supernormal library. These widely accessible secret manuals and techniques were the foundation of an organization's continued growth and prosperity. Yes, the techniques and manuals here can all grant one extraordinary powers, with no side effects. Zheng Xian smiled. We won't use those with side effects on our comrades. His colleagues from the Earth 616 universe fell silent again, suddenly feeling the urge to cry. Some couldn't hold back, tears welling in their eyes. Why don't we have Director Lin? 1,000 words condensed into one single sentence. Zheng Xian even resolved to search the land for their Lin Hao this time. As if reading another part of his own mind, Zheng Xian from the base universe offered a warning. Our Director Lin is special. You may have such a person in your universe, but he won't be Director Lin. Zheng Xian's expression was serious. He was no fool. Many of Lin Hao's creations over the years didn't fit in with the overall universe's style. As someone who had opened his eyes to the universe, Zheng Xian understood their significance. Yet, as clever as he was, he had long since formed a silent understanding with Lin Hao, and later firmly stood alongside him, resisting pressure from his superiors. Seeing his opponent's confusion, Zheng Xian quickly explained, Director Lin's recent admission that he had copied the Heavenly Palace was actually a warning to everyone not to expect divine assistance. He gestured to the techniques and manuals on the bookshelf, then, subduing his boastful expression, declared solemnly, with these, we can fully defend our country on our own, without the need for divine assistance. Zheng Xian's companions suddenly grasped the truth. Beside him, Saber and the other SHIE agents were delighted. Are you serious? We can learn these techniques and manuals, too. I brought you here, of course, to give them to you. Zheng Xian smiled, but he reminded him, but remember to keep it secret. Don't let the enemy get it. He trusted his alter ego's abilities. These SHIE agents, transported to another time and space, must be highly vetted trusted individuals. The Fengshan group was merely thugs. What do we have to pay? The other Zheng Xian was no simple child, understanding the principle of brothers must settle accounts. You don't have to. Zheng Xian shook his head, but said sternly, it's just that we're doing something very dangerous. So dangerous? So dangerous that we're confronting the Creator God Eternity. A single mistake could wipe him out. Of this alien SHIE agent, only Zheng Xian had heard of Eternity. The others stared in confusion. Staring blankly, Zheng Xian finally let out a long sigh. The Monkey King has revealed his power, and Nick Fury on land has seen it. We can't escape. The Weather Witch, who had been silent until then, seemed to sense the danger and immediately spoke up. Can't we kill them to prevent word from leaking? Although she was the captain of the Apotheosis, unlike the others, she was a patriot who had once joined the dynasty organization led by Red Giant to fight against the Mandarin. Later, Red Giant was killed by Thanos, but since he didn't die from the Infinity Stones, he couldn't be brought back. As the team leader, she also had her eye on the actions of some of the guys in Investiture of the Gods. However, her family was broke, and the previous wave of superheroes had been successively consumed by the Mandarin, the Gorgon, and Thanos. She could only organize this group of misfits to keep up appearances. Seeing so much aid coming her way, she felt emboldened. Director Lin just said that Erlang Zhenjin and the Monkey King are real. I wonder if they can defeat Captain Marvel and the Avengers. We haven't fought yet, but we likely will soon, Zheng Xian said, shaking his head. Our real enemy isn't these Avengers. You'll find out soon. So everyone better improve here so you can be of assistance in the upcoming battle. Zheng Xian's words dispelled the sense of guilt among his colleagues from another time and space, and they all looked at their director. The other Zheng Xian remained composed, turning to his subordinates and speaking sternly. We didn't have access to supernatural powers before, but now we do. Should we give up just because we're afraid of the challenge? Saber chimed in once again, remarking, what's there to be afraid of? It's nothing more than death. The other's morale instantly revived. That's right. It's all about risking our lives. Isn't that how we've all gotten through these years? This group of SHIE agents from the Earth 616 universe joined the Multiverse Chinese Alliance and began learning supernatural powers tailored to their needs. Since they were in the base universe, Lin Hao could always reach them to the very last second of their departure, no matter how long it took, without worrying about missing the battle. Furthermore, the location of the supernatural library had been modified by Lin Hao's temporal power, and the flow of time was 100 to 1 compared to the outside world. 100 years inside was equivalent to a single year outside. This was already the current limit of Lin Hao's abilities, far inferior to the space within the Space-Time Administration Bureau. Time there lacked a fluidity of its own. No matter how long they stayed, time outside remained unchanged. As these Spectre agents from the alternate universe were training, they seemed to sense danger. Within the 1939 universe, the altered rules of the universe began to take effect again. Rubberman Reed Richards had his son, Franklin Richards, use his dimensional abilities to bring him to a portal on the ocean surface. There, he began studying the portal, which Lin Hao had opened using technology from the Time Administration. The altered rules of the universe wouldn't have a direct impact. Instead, they would influence the choices of life forms, favoring those that would benefit America. Chapter 512, Sharpening the Knife Before the Battle? No problem, I'll be quick. That eternal guy is just utterly bluffing. Lin Hao frowned as he watched Reed Richards and the Supreme Evolution approach the portal. He still believed that the altered cosmic rules were Eternal's doing. He wondered if a single Eternal dared to show up. How could you, a multidimensional Eternal with greater authority, hide like a rat behind the scenes? However, Lin Hao's current level of cultivation could only partially alter certain cosmic rules. He couldn't permanently alter certain rules, especially those involving the causal relationships between living things. Thinking of causality, Lin Hao's gaze inevitably turned to the child guarding Reed Richards. Franklin Richards possessed a superpower involving causality, a truly powerful weapon. You're not going to retract the portal. Yang Jian, standing beside him, held Lin Hao accountable, regaining his true lord's aura. They already know it was your doing, no need to hide it, it's useless. Lin Hao shook his head and replied, that black guy just passed the message back. He must have had a backup plan when he asked for help, and you don't understand how powerful that rubber man is. His greatest strength isn't his ability to move freely or his unimpeded mobility, but his brain. Don't use so many adjectives, Yang Jian muttered silently in his heart. It only makes me realize your envy and jealousy. Well, all men should be envious. Oh, except the great sage. After all, he's a real man who can hold the 7 fairies captive while only caring about eating peaches. And real peaches at that. If the Marvel Universe holds a bucket of wisdom, this guy holds at least 4 liters, including every deity except the omniscient eternity. Lin Hao was indeed wary of Rubberman Reed's brains. He'd repeatedly severely injured or even destroyed ancient gods and creator gods with his mere brain power. Galactus became a backdrop for his exploits, and eventually even assumed the role of creator, forcing a multitude of ancient gods to spawn with Mother Earth. So, Rubberman was truly impressive. He could even handle Mother Earth. This impressive feat stemmed from the Fantastic Four comic book series, the seminal work of Marvel's 1960s resurgence, a last-ditch effort by Stan Lee. After nearly 2 decades of development, superhero comic sales had slumped, both for Marvel and its longtime rival DC. Readers had grown tired of these masked, outlandishly dressed characters fighting crime. Furthermore, America had long since emerged from World War II and entered its true golden age. The new generation of young people, unimpressed by the noble, glorious images of Superman and Captain America, began to pursue novelty and eccentricity, leading to the emergence of the Beatles. Internationally, Japanese manga was gaining momentum. Osamu Tezuka's cartoon-like simplicity style challenged the muscular, exaggerated figures of European and American comics, becoming even more popular with children. Around the same time, Japan's Havoc in Heaven had captivated the world, but its fortunes declined. Faced with internal and external challenges, both Marvel and DC began seeking new approaches. Stan Lee, in partnership with Jack Kirby, known as the master of American comic art and the king of comics, took a gamble with the Fantastic Four series. Breaking with the tradition of superheroes hiding their identities, the series allowed them to publicly debut and form families. Ultimately, the series was a success, extending Marvel's lifespan. The subsequent releases of Iron Man and Spider-Man were also thanks to the Fantastic Four. It's no exaggeration to say that the Fantastic Four ushered in the era of modern hero prosperity. Other heroes, including teams like the Avengers, looked up to them as role models. Naturally, editors favored this star player. Whenever Reed Richards appeared, his brain would undoubtedly be put to use. From small things like using fire hydrants to cool down enemies to grand things like building a time machine to travel through time and space, as long as the Rubber Man used his brain, he would definitely come up with a solution. Captain America had a bonus of willpower, while the Rubber Man had a special mind. Sure enough, before Lin Hao finished speaking, Reed Richards below him had a look of sudden realization, so that's how it is, shit. Director Lin felt for the first time that he was intellectually outmatched. Previously, facing Tony Stark and Thanos, Director Lin had always felt that his unreasonable brain was no less capable than his own, but now he had encountered an even more unreasonable mind. I understand how this portal works, Reed Richards said excitedly. Give me some time. I need some equipment, and I can build something similar. The Supreme Evolutionary, hovering nearby, looked bewildered. You figured it out? What the hell do you figure out? Never doubting his own intelligence, the Supreme Evolutionary seriously suspected the Rubber Man of boasting. Unfortunately, he didn't know that the Rubber Man didn't need to brag when it came to something impressive. It could adjust its size and specifications. Lin Hao, perched in the clouds, knew the man wasn't exaggerating and snapped his fingers. Instantly, a portal appeared on land, connecting to the Baxter Building in Earth 616, the headquarters of the Fantastic Four. Yang Jian, standing nearby, turned to Lin Hao and chuckled, "Fellow Taoist Lin, you're quite confident. With a true lord and the great sage here, why worry about a few rogues?" Lin Hao boasted. Meanwhile, the great sage, grateful to Lin Hao for dragging him out of his original world and giving him the chance to break free from the shackles of fate, was more candid than Yang Jian. "Fellow Taoist Lin, I won't hide this from you. Just dealing with those three alone would be a real hassle. If more powerful figures were to arrive, I'm afraid I wouldn't be able to take care of you." The great sage only had Captain Marvel, Hyperion, and Star Mark in his sight. Sunspot could only manipulate a fraction of the Golden Crow's power, and even a Golden Crow self-destruction would be within the reach of the great sage's current strength. However, Carol possessed the binary power, which allowed her to control every form of energy in the electromagnetic spectrum and gravitational field at a cosmic level, effectively controlling the electromagnetic force and gravitational force, two of the four fundamental forces of the universe. This binary power greatly amplified Carol's strength, defense, and speed. In the comics, she easily destroyed a planet and devoured a black hole. In the film, she even helped the Kree reignite their extinct sun, a feat even more challenging than destroying the sun itself, as she flew into the interior of a star and ignited it with her own power. Hyperion, bearing the Superman form, was certainly no weakling. Even without the might of Silver Superman, Star Mark, relying on his Star Mark energy, could single-handedly hold his own against Hulk, Thor, and Hyperion. Even if the three weren't desperate, he was at least able to handle them with ease. As for the yellow-skinned, white-hearted man, possessing the 10 rings, he was nothing to behold. The Jade Emperor of the Marvel Universe would easily defeat the Great Sage in a single blow, so what did his 10 rings mean? Hearing the Great Sage's frank words, Lin Hao considered the other powerful beings on Earth and realized he was indeed posing a challenge. "Great Sage, could you please teach me the great celestial immortal art?" Then, turning to Yang Jian, Lin Hao asked, "True Lord, I have long admired the 8-9 profound art. Could you please take a look?" Since extracting the two from the group, Lin Hao had occasionally learned some Taoist techniques and magical powers from them, but the fundamental foundation for enlightenment had yet to be discussed. Even making friends requires a gradual, step-by-step approach, right? Sharpening your sword before the battle, Yang Jian was surprised. "You don't seem like a foolish person. It's okay, I'm quick," Lin Hao smiled proudly. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 513, Cheat Practice. Faced with Lin Hao's request, the great sage unhesitatingly offered the great celestial art. Regardless of the true context of Journey to the West, the great sage in black myth is a life shrouded in calculation. Daoism, Buddhism, and the celestial court each made their own moves, leaving him like a flea on the chessboard of heaven and earth, manipulated by Taoist patriarch, Buddha, and the Jade Emperor. Ultimately, he uncovered the truth and launched a desperate struggle. Having freed himself from the shackles of fate, the great sage no longer cared whether Bodhi Patriarch was an incarnation of Tathagata or Laojian, naturally free from sectarian prejudice. He cared more about Lin Hao's safety than Yang Jian did, fearing he might run into serious trouble and, in a moment of despair, thrust his club into the screen. If Lin Hao dared to thrust his club into the screen, Taoist Patriarch, Buddha, and the Jade Emperor would surely follow his club. Would that be another difficult situation for him? At least he would have to wait until he achieved the Hunundao fruit to have the confidence to resist them. After offering the technique, the great sage, seeing Yang Jian still hesitant, sneered, "Could it be that the Jade Emperor's beloved nephew has become the third-generation first disciple of the Xianjiao sect? Shut your hairy mouth, stinking monkey," Yang Jian cursed, but this, provoked, condensed a ball of golden light from his fingertips and pointed it at Lin Hao. As the great sage had said, after the conferred gods, Yang Jian's relationship with the Xianjiao sect grew distant. While not utterly estranged, they were no longer as close as they once were. But what good was the heavenly palace? It was just as full of schemes. Yang Jian would rather stay in Guanjiankao than go to heaven. Now that he had arrived in another, independent world, completely free from his old schemes, not only was the great sage happy, but Yang Jian himself was also delighted. Alice, if only he could bring his sister and roaring sky dog with him. With these thoughts in mind, Yang Jian hoped that Lin Hao would become even more powerful. He finally overcame his inner sectarianism and abandoned his master's harsh warnings. Fortunately, Jade Xianren didn't make Yang Jian swear not to pass on his knowledge. Otherwise, he would have inevitably left a gap in his mindset, hindering his future cultivation. The great sage was no different. It can only be said that Jade Xianren and Bodhi Patriarch were extremely confident. Under normal circumstances, their presence was sufficient to maintain the deterrent effect of factionalism. "Thank you," Lin Hao thanked him solemnly after receiving the gift. The 8-9 profound art is a slow and steady process. You're not sharpening your sword at the last minute. Before Yang Jian could finish his words, he noticed Lin Hao vanish in a flash. In a split second, Lin Hao reappeared. "You?" Yang Jian was stunned, as he sensed a powerful profound energy fluctuation from Lin Hao. Not only was his aura turbulent, but Lin Hao's gaze was also slightly numb, a hint of the vicissitudes of life and a nonchalant attitude towards the passage of time. Yang Jian had only seen such a look in his master's eyes and the other two saints, the numbness to time that befell the immortal. Lin Hao, of course, hadn't achieved sagehood, nor had he attained immortality. But he could remain immune to the effects of time under the world tree at the end of time. "Fellow Taoist Lin," the great sage asked with concern, "how many years have you been cultivating this time?" The great sage and Yang Jian both knew that Lin Hao possessed the power of time and could open space-time portals connecting to other universes, but they had never been to the end of time and didn't know where the Time Management Bureau was located. After a moment's pause, Lin Hao slowly responded, like a rusty machine slowly starting to run after being oiled. "I don't know." Lin Hao numbly shook his head and replied, "I didn't calculate." After obtaining the great celestial immortal art and the 8-9 profound art, Lin Hao headed to the end of time, where he could unlock cheats and fully cultivate these two divine skills. To be honest, Lin Hao's aptitude for cultivation was only average, far inferior to those favored by the heavenly Dao, like the great sage and Yang Jian. He could only rely on the gradual grinding of time. Fortunately, his mastery of the power of time allowed him to constantly see the future, allowing him to gradually eliminate incorrect options even when faced with problems and bottlenecks. Director Lin employed experimental methods, testing the waters himself, and gradually found a path that suited him, perfectly aligned with the path he had previously embarked on. What followed was a tedious accumulation of experience. Without the specialized structure of his brain, which allowed him to compartmentalize his emotions, a normal person would simply not be able to endure such a long period of seclusion. In the later stages of his cultivation, Lin Hao finally followed Vegapunk's lead, separating his 7 emotions and 6 desires. He confined several clones to the space-time administration to satisfy their various desires, and periodically recalled his original body for a fresh refining. Finally, when his technique was fully developed, he completely suppressed his 7 emotions and 6 desires, then spent considerable time eliminating any further thoughts that arose before finally emerging from seclusion. Normal people couldn't learn his methods, nor could they exploit his cheats. This, the great sage and Yang Jian exchanged a glance, the former's eyes radiating 2 golden rays, while the latter's eyes widened. They both looked at Lin Hao, but each frowned. Strange. Your cultivation is clearly on par with ours. More than that, Yang Jian interrupted the great sage, correcting him. Fellow Taoist Lin's current realm has already surpassed ours. Ever since the great sage was thrown into the 8 trigrams furnace by the Jade Emperor for 49 days of training, he'd developed a fear of smoke and fire. Yang Jian's divine eye, however, possessed a heightened sense of insight. Both men remained halfway through their sentences before glancing at each other, each bewildered. Why isn't there any tribulation energy within you, fellow Taoist? Logically, you should be overcoming it, not to mention the thunder tribulation. Even the 3 calamities and 5 tribulations should have come a few times, right? Could it be because the heavens and the earth are different? With the passage of time, and through conversation, Lin Hao's stagnant mind slowly recovered. He immediately extended his finger, pointed at the void, and suddenly a mirror materialized. This was different from his previous method of creating a mirror by condensing water into ice. It was a true manipulation of fate, creating something out of nothing. However, fate is the great Tao, and by this point, Lin Hao had only mastered a limited amount. The face in the mirror was still Lin Hao's, but even though his spirit couldn't emerge, he could still see the true spirit within him. It was still his original soul. Body and soul hadn't yet merged. Lin Hao didn't want to elaborate on his identity as a time traveler, but he raised his doubts. The great sage shook his head in confusion. This was a gap in his knowledge. The spiritual stone monkey was born and raised naturally, and even a hint of true spirit was naturally generated. Yang Jian pondered for a moment, then shook his head. Both the 8-9 profound art and the great celestial immortal art cultivate both the body and soul. While each has its own emphasis, neither is biased. Moreover, even when Nezha lost his physical body, he was still able to achieve sainthood in his lotus root form. Even if the body and soul are in disparity, as long as they are perfectly aligned, it won't affect his immortality. On the contrary, if the physical body receives the opportunity, it will be of assistance. Yang Jian remembered the super race mode Lin Hao had used during their previous fight and assumed he was referring to this situation. I think it's most likely due to this world. After all, there's not even any spiritual energy here. This reminder brought a sudden realization to Lin Hao. He had previously absorbed spiritual energy seeds from a cheat, allowing him to cultivate and perform Taoist techniques normally even without spiritual energy from the outside world. Several universes he had passed through were devoid of spiritual energy, causing Lin Hao, who had been in seclusion for countless years, to almost overlook this fact. The great sage and Yang Jian had long since reached the golden immortal realm, becoming self-contained and unconcerned with the presence or absence of external spiritual energy. Having it was icing on the cake, but lacking it was nothing to worry about. However, thunder tribulations and the 3 calamities and 5 difficulties were heaven's trials for practitioners. How could a world without even spiritual energy bring about such tribulations? That's easy. I'll generate spiritual energy right away, and I'll even give them a big surprise. The great demon king smiled a familiar smile. Chapter 514, The Merciful Master Charles. The sudden appearance of a portal interrupted Reed Richards's thoughts. Even his brain, blessed by the editor, couldn't comprehend Lin Hao's intentions. Dad, that looks like the Baxter building across the way. Franklin Richards beside him reminded Reed Richards. Damn, could those people in the clouds have created this portal? His clever mind quickly sorted out the logic. Reed, have Franklin take you back for help immediately. Nick Fury's voice boomed over the communicator. Far away on land, Nick Fury snatched the communicator from Ben Grimm's ear and shouted to Reed. To ensure smooth communication within the independent dimensions created by Franklin, the Fantastic Four had invented a device capable of communicating across these isolated dimensions, thanks to Reed's blessed brain. This kind of amazing technology was naturally unavailable to outsiders. As an elite eagle, Reed naturally sensed the delicate atmosphere and understood the Black Egg's anxiety. Furthermore, the other side possessed portal technology that could connect them to their own universe at any time. This forced Red to consider whether the yellow people in the clouds would pose a threat to their universe. Western elite eagles perpetually maintained a Cold War mentality. When faced with any external influence, their primary concern was whether their own interests would be harmed, stemming from a narrow-minded bourgeois concept of national sovereignty and self-interest. Son, hurry, Reed considered for a second before making an immediate decision. No matter how the situation unfolded, their side must possess a strong force to be able to respond confidently. As Tony Stark relayed to the blonde reporter, his father's words, "If you want to avoid being bullied, you must have a bigger stick than others." What a remarkable race. Aside from that woman who came to question them last time, they've never even considered negotiating with you. Yang Jian, perched in the clouds, observed the commotion below and tutted, "They clearly aren't the ones with whom you have a direct grudge, yet you've never considered compromising. That's normal. Barbarians fear power, not virtue. They won't yield until they're intimidated." Lin Hao sneered. Tisk-tisk, even monkeys know to wait until they've obtained the suture before striking. These guys are even dumber than monkeys. Upon hearing this, the great sage erupted in anger. "Three-eyed monster, you're looking for a fight, aren't you?" Amidst the bustle above the clouds, the ocean beneath was equally restless. A fish-shaped submarine silently sailed southward from the northern Atlantic, approaching the eastern edge of the North American continent. "Maximus, you'll destroy Adeline and the Inhumans," Black Bolt, with a fork on his head, shouted at the man on the throne. A hint of pity crossed Maximus's eyes, but he quickly dismissed those thoughts and regained his resolve. "You're wrong. If we don't destroy these enemies, Earth will be destroyed. How will Adeline and the Inhumans survive, huh?" Black Bolt exclaimed in disbelief, his mouth wide open, his voice booming. "When did you start caring about the ordinary people on Earth?" Maximus frowned, his head aching. Black Bolt's voice was too loud. No, Black Bolt finally realized something was wrong. He stared at Maximus intently and shouted, "You're not my brother." "Who are you?" As the one who knew fish lips owed out our best, Black Bolt shouldn't have taken so long to react. It was Death himself who first annihilated Maximus' soul and then inserted the soul of young Charles into him, seamlessly merging them. Charles, who inherited Maximus's memories, could remain undetectable as long as he remained silent, undetectable by any technology, magic, or supernatural power, not even the reader who could sense the Inhuman's vibrations. Upon awakening from Maximus's body, the mature Charles quickly inherited his memories. Combining their previous experiences, he finally grasped the situation. Given his cautious nature, he naturally refrained from expressing himself rashly. While Charles didn't know why his consciousness had appeared in Maximus's body, he knew that Apocalypse had seized his powers. Apocalypse then broadcast to the nation that a sovereign spacecraft had launched another bombardment on Earth. Such a commotion couldn't be hidden from the Inhumans, whose technology was far superior to that of ordinary humans. Charles thus learned of what was happening outside. Faced with this situation, Charles immediately decided to go out and save the world. Besides this sense of justice, he had people he cared about in his true home out there. Moreover, as he'd said, facing the dual pressures of the aliens and Apocalypse, this little wretch would struggle to hold his own. What good would hiding in Adeline do then? Charles, once a mere 10-year-old, was powerless in the face of this situation. However, this new body possessed the same superpowers as his own. Thanks to the perfect fusion of soul and body, Charles could use his abilities without a single lag. While Maximus's telepathic abilities were far less advanced than Charles, he had lived for centuries, and his abilities were undoubtedly more developed than Charles's, who was only 10 years old. After taking over his body, Charles quickly adapted to the new power, overcoming Maximus's weakness of requiring concentration to activate his abilities, shortening the casting time to an instant. By this point, Charles's telepathic abilities had reached the level seen before his encounter with Apocalypse in the film. Using this power, Charles easily controlled the Inhumans guarding him. After his release, he expanded his puppets and persuaded them to defend Earth. Seeing Black Bolt break free again, Charles intensified his efforts, forcibly altering his mind. The anger on Black Bolt's face faded, his gaze becoming numb. Charles, panting heavily, gave Black Bolt a wry smile. This guy has become immune to his brother's abilities. Maximus, once determined to overthrow Gigi's rule, had naturally used his telepathic abilities on his beloved Gigi, and more than once. As time goes by, Black Bolt's mind has developed resistance, and he occasionally struggles to break free from Charles' influence. After forcibly altering his mind, Charles gave him an apologetic look. "I'm sorry, to protect Earth, I can only rely on your help. When this is over, I'll make sure everyone forgets what happened." See, how kind our Master Charles is. The Inhumans' technology, derived from an abandoned Kree city on the moon, is truly cutting edge, a world apart from the technological advancements of World War II, when human technology was just beginning to take off. The submarine quietly arrived off the eastern coast of North America. Charles could already see on the screen the spacecraft in the sky, Apocalypse and his remaining clones, the Asgardian God King riding a Pegasus. And most strikingly, the clouds in the palace above them. "What?" the kind-hearted Master Charles said, bewildered. Who are these people? He had expected only Apocalypse and the aliens to be his enemies, but what was this vast cloud formation with its palace complex? The situation clearly exceeded Master Charles's expectations, but after a moment's shock, he regained his composure. No matter who the enemy is, we must not let them destroy the Earth. Charles naturally didn't know the limit of Black Bolt's power, but by reading his memories, he discovered the damage Black Bolt had caused, which gave him the confidence to defeat this powerful enemy. Chapter 489 is out. If you haven't read it yet, go check it out. If you have read it, don't read it anymore, it's not as exciting as the previous version. After the transition, the editor-in-chief will start recommending it. There will be a few more chapters in the next 2 days to rush down the bestseller list. Chapter 515, Confrontation in the Real World. If Lin Hao wants to overcome the tribulation, he must first imbue the current universe with a special energy, spiritual power. This isn't difficult, it simply requires retracing the original Li Dai Tao Jiang plan. The problem is that Eternity is watching the multiverse, and with his daughter's spirit now reappearing in the real world, completing this process requires even greater caution than before. Eternity, from outside the multiverse, has been keeping an eye on Lin Hao. Just now, when he went to the end of time to cultivate, his disappearance had naturally been noticed by Eternity. This person's energy fluctuations are much stronger than before. Seeing this Earthling, who had once destroyed a cell of his own, growing stronger, Eternity's remaining humanity made him feel a little anxious. Unfortunately, the editor's new plot twist has made Loki's transformation into the World Tree a manifestation of the multiverse. Without consulting Eternity, they've given the great creator God an additional body and a vulnerable position. Now that Lin Hao controls the time administration, he controls the World Tree. Even Eternity is wary. Unless the editors abandon these settings and eliminate Eternity's vulnerability, he can act without hesitation. These editors are useless. Now, Eternal watched helplessly as Lin Hao vanished for another moment. He went to the editor's world again. The creator God felt his humanity stirred by the fluctuating emotions. In this universe, Lin Hao had only been gone for a moment, but he had actually passed a considerable amount of time. First, Lin Hao returned to his base universe, where Eternal couldn't peer. Then, he sent a message to Deadpool through the demon's contract. Then, with Deadpool's help, he broke through the dimension and entered the real world. "Boss, I've locked that idiot Canadian in a basement safe, and Dr. Zola is keeping an eye on him," Deadpool immediately boasted. "Well done." Lin Hao smiled and pointed at him, and Deadpool noticed that his gun had actually grown a size. This is called treating the disease with the right medicine. Rewards must be tailored to the needs of your subordinates to achieve the best results. "Boss, I love you so much," an overjoyed Deadpool immediately reached out to check, and finding that the gun had indeed grown a size, he danced with joy, wanting to give Lin Hao a hug. Unfortunately, no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't get within 3 feet of Lin Hao. "Wow, boss, you've gotten stronger again." Lin Hao smiled and approached the computer. Arnim Zora immediately turned on the screen, revealing his fawning smile. "Master, you're finally here again. Where's Eternal's daughter now?" Lin Hao asked immediately. Zora quickly pulled up a large amount of surveillance footage and presented it to his master. "She went to Longhu Mountain last week and just arrived at Emei Mountain yesterday. Wherever she goes, she consults the monks and Taoists there, learning Buddhist teachings and Taoist scriptures." Lin Hao listened silently to Zora's narration. In fact, With his current spiritual power, he was already more efficient at browsing data than Arnim Zora, this special electronic creature. However, countless years of practice had dulled Lin Hao's human nature, making him prefer to perceive the world with human functions. This woman is incredibly gifted. She can memorize tedious Buddhist and Taoist texts with just one reading, understand the meaning of Buddhist monks and Taoist priests' lectures, and even apply them to other situations. She's already exposed the abbots of several renowned temples as fake, and the Buddhist community now has a love-hate relationship with her. Tisk, the abbots are so busy running their businesses and offering tablets to war criminals, how could they have the time to study Buddhism? Lin Hao sneered. Master, you're right. I think the abbot must have mistaken her for a Buddhist woman at first, but who knew she was so capable that she couldn't argue with him, Zora said. After observing Linxin's movements and confirming that he wouldn't be returning to America anytime soon, Lin Hao took action. He resumed his previous identity, transformed into his past life, retrieved his artificial substitute, and went to work at Marvel Studios as usual. For the past few years, the android devil had managed Wang Yuan's identity, safeguarding Lin Hao's editorial privileges at Marvel. He remained reclusive and taciturn, focusing solely on work during the week and only occasionally going out alone for shopping on holidays. Marvel executives saw him as a hard-working, uncomplaining slave, while colleagues considered him withdrawn, bordering on autism. Women had approached him, and men had also made advances, but the android devil, unresponsive to the urges, rejected them all. This led to rumors circulating behind Wang Yuan's back, suggesting he had a physical disability and was incapable of attracting men and women. However, rumors only gain momentum when they receive feedback. If the target of the gossip remains indifferent, the rumors will soon lose their momentum. So, when Lin Hao walked into Marvel again, he was met with formulaic faces, smiling, nodding, and saying hello. That was all. He ignored them and proceeded with his familiar routine. To facilitate future revisions to the universe's setting, over the past few years, the android stand-ins have gradually been reassigned to the post-production department, where they have free access to the warehouse. This means Lin Hao no longer has to go through the hassle of the previous trip and can simply enter the warehouse with a key. Linxin has been in the real world for some time now, and Kevin Feige and Jonathan Hickman's new single-volume comic book has been released to lukewarm reception and mediocre sales. Their goal isn't to make a small profit, after all. However, Lin Hao controls their communication channels with the multiverse, so they still don't know the exact method used to create everything, nor how the multiverse will change after the new plot is developed. If they knew, they would have strictly guarded the comic manuscripts and film and television masters, making it impossible for Lin Hao to easily access the warehouse where these items are stored. Lin Hao chose the 1939 universe to undergo the tribulation instead of returning to the base universe because he was worried about any unexpected events during the process. After all, the Thunder Tribulation is the manifestation of the consciousness of the heavenly Dao. Who knows what will happen once the tribulation begins? What if the consciousness of the Marvel Universe refocuses on the base universe? As for why they didn't travel to the already connected Earth 616 universe to overcome the tribulation and thereby bring disaster to that universe, it was simply because the universe was comprised of so many comics and film and television works. Earth 616 was once the main universe, Marvel's central stage. 80 years had passed since the first comic book was published, and the vast majority of plots that had occurred during that time had taken place in Earth 616. The number of comic manuscripts and film and television masters involved was enormous, and much of the ancient material had long been destroyed. Regardless, Lin Hao believed that once the portal opened, the elite eagles of Earth 616 would undoubtedly travel to the 1939 universe. Keeping the enemy out of the country's borders and avoiding war on one's own turf, it was a simple principle. Lin Hao calmly edited the comic manuscripts and film and television masters. Just as he was nearing completion, he suddenly felt a sense of enlightenment while in the Lian Temple of Mount Emily. Master, excuse me, I need to go to the bathroom. Linxin clasped his hands together and bowed to the nun sitting on the cushion across from him. Then he quickly stood up and trotted out of the room. What's going on? Have my powers returned? Linxin had just seen a picture of a Chinese man editing comics at Marvel Studios. Who is he? Chapter 516, Confrontation in the Real World. Linxin, as Eternal's daughter, is actually Eternal's incarnation, a form of self-perception used to experience life and emotions. She and her 8 siblings possess some of Eternal's divine power, or rather, certain authority over the universe. Lin Hao is the embodiment of visions and sudden enlightenments within the multiverse. In traditional Western mythology, visions and sudden enlightenment represent Lin Hao's divine authority. However, since arriving in the real world, Lin Hao has lost both divine authority and divine power, retaining only the supernatural abilities inherent in this body. A sudden epiphany surprised Lin Hao, who thought she had regained her divine power, but after further experimentation, she discovered otherwise. After confirming this, Lin Hao recalled the scene she had just witnessed. Is that man a Marvel editor? What is he doing? Why did I suddenly see him? A multitude of thoughts flooded her mind. Lin Hao is currently using the appearance of his previous life, which matched his soul, but Eternal and Lin Hao had only seen him in this life. Otherwise, Lin Hao's reaction would have been much faster, and she would have teleported back to America the moment her epiphany occurred. It was during this delay that Lin Hao completed the final touch, adding spiritual energy to the 1939 universe. Never mind, let's go take a look. Lin Hao only pondered for a moment before making a decision. She teleported directly back to the office Kevin Feige had prepared for her at Marvel, right next to the president's office. Upon arriving at the building, she headed directly to the warehouse where Lin Hao was staying. Lin Hao had memorized the building's layout from her first visit. She now maintained an ordinary human appearance, save for her sparse red hair. However, Marvel employees had long known of her existence, treating her as the president's personal secretary. Although there were some rumors, they dared not discuss them excessively. Such things and such people are a constant presence in every country and company. The moment Lin Hao appeared, Lin Hao, who had just finished his work, was aware of her arrival. With his current spiritual awareness, he could easily cover the entire Earth. Is this coming straight for me? Lin Hao, observing Lin Hao's direct approach to the warehouse with his divine sense, didn't take any chances. He calmly placed the comic manuscript and film master tapes into the Kyankan bag, a friendly gift from Yang Jian, which had been used to store the formation materials. He then placed the copies back in the warehouse's filing cabinet. Since his power had remained unaffected during his 2 visits, Lin Hao was unaware that Lin Hao had been stripped of his divine power by this real world, and naturally considered him a formidable enemy. The crucial step in defeating Eternal was using his editing privileges to remove his blood lock. Without this, no attack could harm Eternal. As Eternal's clone, Lin Hao didn't possess this unattackable privilege, but his own strength was formidable. If Eternal was Hongjin, Lin Hao was Hongjin's clone. Despite his fear, Lin Hao didn't hide. After a period of arduous retreat, Director Lin's cultivation had skyrocketed. Although he hadn't yet transcended the tribulation, Yang Jian still believed his cultivation was superior. What are you doing? Lin Hao, oblivious to the danger, stepped directly before Lin Hao and spoke bluntly. Even without divine power and divine authority, the inherent strength of her body was enough to destroy the world, leading her to believe that humans in the real world could harm her. I'm working. Director Lin tried to offer a second thought. He glanced up at Lin Hao, maintaining his rigid demeanor. Working, Lin Hao glanced at the filing cabinet, puzzled. These files are all old. I haven't heard the editorial department has any plans to reorganize them. Lin Hao was lying to him. This sudden epiphany couldn't possibly be a sign of love sickness, and Lin Hao wasn't her type. Since she had suddenly realized this, there must be something wrong with this Asian man. The editorial department certainly had no plans to organize old files, but they certainly didn't mind the slaves taking the initiative to sort them out. As long as it didn't interfere with their work, the boss would love for them to feel a sense of honor that the company was their home. I want to learn the painting styles of my predecessors and improve my skills. This was an excuse Lin Hao had used years ago, and it was also the persona he had used his artificial devil to maintain in the past few years. You're lying. Lin Hao, naturally unable to discern Lin Hao's true intentions, simply assumed he was unusual and continued to deceive him. Who are you? Do you have any right to control what I'm doing? Lin Hao looked up again, a hint of grievance and anger on his face, and continued to rescue. At the same time, his spiritual sense swept across, only to find that the other party was completely integrated, like an ordinary person, without a single energy fluctuation. Director Lin grew increasingly fearful, and his Taoist magic was ready to be unleashed. Lin Hao couldn't detect Lin Hao's spiritual sense, but her keen intuition detected that someone had just been observing her, from the inside out. She, too, prepared to strike. Just as the two sides were about to clash, The warehouse door opened and Marvel Editor-in-Chief Jonathan Hickman walked in. "Ms. Diana, why are you back?" Kevin Feige had just noticed Lin Hao had suddenly returned to the office building and had quickly called Jonathan to inquire about the situation. These two men were now obsessed with superpowers and immortality, so naturally they were closely following Lin Hao's every move. However, Lin Hao had inexplicably gone to China to seek immortals and hadn't returned since. The two couldn't make a big fuss about it, so they could only call him every now and then, fearing Lin Hao would ignore them after receiving a reply. Seeing Jonathan arrive, Lin Hao pointed at Lin Hao and asked, "Who is this person?" Jonathan stared at Lin Hao carefully, finally recognizing him. All Asian faces looked the same to them. "Oh, his name is Wang Yuan, a senior editor. Does he always like coming to the warehouse?" Lin Hao pressed. "Like tinkering with these old files? I'm not sure. I'd need to ask his deputy editor-in-chief." The editorial department was so large, how could the editor-in-chief possibly be familiar with every editor's daily schedule? "Mom, the CEO is waiting." Lin Hao paid no heed to the two Marvel executives, still staring intently at Lin Hao, carefully recalling the old comics he had just glimpsed during his epiphany. "Bring all the comics about mutants and inhumans behind you over here. I want to see them." Lin Hao hesitated for a moment, then stood up obediently and was about to open the filing cabinet when Lin Hao attacked from behind. She planned to subdue the Asian man first, then thoroughly question him about his actions and why. He was just an unwelcome Asian slave, so what if he was wrong? But just as Lin Hao lunged forward, she realized her body was restrained by some force, unable to move no matter how hard she struggled. The unremarkable Asian man turned around, calmly assessing her, and uttered a slightly self-deprecating chuckle. "You've been so wary of me for so long, but it turns out you're just a paper tiger." After Lin Hao attacked, he finally realized that Lin Hao wasn't integrated but rather devoid of energy. "Interesting. Do you, the native Marvel gods, lose your powers after arriving in this real world?" Director Lin's eyes gleamed with joy. "You?" Lin Hao immediately realized, "You are that man." Chapter 517, Confrontation in the Real World. Real world. Lin Hao immobilized Lin Hao, a voluptuous figure with wavy red hair. However, what was about to unfold wasn't a happy one. While Lin Hao preferred this kind of drama, being fucked was preferable to being killed. Lin Hao channeled his magical power, detaching himself and Lin Hao from this world, effectively freezing time outside. This was a magical power Director Lin had developed, akin to a realm, or perhaps even a self-contained world. Within this world, Lin Hao could isolate his opponent from all contact with the outside world, much like the strange dimension the little devil connected to. Previously, Director Lin had relied on cheats, but now he could finally rely on himself. "Now we can have a good chat." Lin Hao created a soft chair and sat on it, observing Lin Hao, frozen in his forward stance, with interest. "Since you've lost your divine power, how were you able to detect me so quickly? Could it be that this body of yours not only possesses teleportation but also telepathy surpassing Charles Xavier's?" Lin Hao, realizing his predicament, chose to remain silent. Lin Hao sneered, a fingertip gleaming with spiritual light as he pointed. "I didn't notice you." A sudden image flashed through my mind. You editing comics in a warehouse. Lin Hao, deprived of her divine protection, was unable to withstand Lin Hao's attack and unleashed a detailed account. After a long, rambling conversation, Lin Hao finally reacted and cast a horrified glance at the man across from her. "What did you do to me? What kind of power was that just now?" Though she had lost her divine power, this body, created by the eternal God himself, was far more powerful and perfect than those of the Celestials and the Eternal Titans. Even the latter were immune to most mental and spiritual attacks in the universe, and Lin Hao's body was even immune to all spiritual powers except those of the Creator God. But the man before her merely pointed, and she, as if losing herself, confessed the truth. Lin Hao was horrified, while Lin Hao was lost in thought. Because Lin Hao had just recounted everything she had experienced since arriving in the real world, Director Lin naturally noticed something was amiss. "You lost your divine power upon arrival in this world, which means this world rejects the power of you, the indigenous gods. This is easy to understand. Deadpool alone could massacre the editorial staff, so what if a cosmic god were to arrive in this world with his divine power intact? The plot is broken, the logic is illogical, an editor wouldn't write such a plot, and even if they did, no one would buy it. But just as I was tinkering, you suddenly had an epiphany and saw me." Lin Hao frowned. "Who made you see this?" "Your father is eternal." Lin Hao asked himself, answering, no. If your father's power could affect this world, you wouldn't have had to conduct the experiment before, and you wouldn't have had to stay here waiting for a reply. At this moment, Lin Hao finally realized there was another force trying to stop him. Lin Hao reached out to Lin Xian and peeled off her flesh, leaving only a skeleton. After the immobilization spell wore off, the skeleton scattered to the ground. Then, thunder struck her, and the 5 thunders' righteousness reduced her skeleton to dust. But at this moment, Marvel Editor-in-Chief Jonathan Hickman, whose outside world was supposed to be stagnant, suddenly discovered he had regained the power of Captain Universe. He broke free, plummeting into a sea of pink bubbles and vanishing. Lin Hao, a man of his own, sensed the changes outside and abruptly rose to his feet. Again, though he wasn't sure what was causing this, Lin Hao realized his true enemy was quietly making its move. With this thought in mind, Lin Hao released his magical powers, surveyed the warehouse, and with a wave of his hand, collected all the comic manuscripts and film and television masters. From then on, while he likely would lose his position as Marvel editor, he couldn't leave manuscripts that could alter the universe's existing settings to his enemy. With these manuscripts, Marvel would have to rely on new works to continuously fill in the plots and settings, giving him room to maneuver. After completing these tasks, Lin Hao teleported back to his apartment and asked Deadpool and Arnim Zola, "Where's that Canadian?" Zola noticed his master's serious expression and immediately activated the surveillance footage of the Canadian Deadpool being held captive. Lin Hao teleported over with Deadpool and, with a wave of his hand, unleashed a bolt of lightning, wiping out the Canadian Deadpool imprisoned in the safe. He then ordered Zora, "Abandon this place immediately and go to the backup safe house. From now on, reduce your activities and only focus on quietly gathering information online." "Okay." Zora, unsure of what was happening, obeyed obediently. After all, he was only a spirit now, and Lin Hao could easily reclaim him from the world and return him to the little devil's parchment. "Let's go back," Lin Hao said. Deadpool stepped forward, grasping the boss's hand and carrying him into a sea of pink bubbles. As soon as they left, Zora ignited the computer system stored in the apartment, transporting the spirit to the safe house in China. Not only did the apartment catch fire, but the nearby Marvel building also collapsed, causing countless casualties. However, something truly miraculous occurred. After 2400 hours, the real world that should have entered the next day was still the same as the day that had just passed. It was as if the major incident in America had never occurred. Arnim Zola was horrified to discover he could still receive signals from the destroyed server, and he quickly relayed the news to Lin Hao. Lin Hao, having returned to 1939, frowned. Sure enough, Marvel is the loop switch for the real world. Any action that threatens Marvel will be restarted. Deadpool had murdered the editor twice, yet not only was he oblivious, but the Marvel employees treated it as a mere anecdote. Of course, the so-called real world couldn't be real. However, people and objects outside the real world were naturally not subject to the reboot. Therefore, Ling Xian had indeed been eliminated by Lin Hao, and the android he had brought there years ago hadn't reappeared. Fellow Taoist Lin, this world is ablaze with spiritual energy. The great sage's voice awoke Lin Hao. Do you want to begin your tribulation journey now? Lin Hao turned to look at the great sage, only to see a glimmer of curiosity and anticipation in his gaze. I, old son, wish to see how the thunder tribulations in this world differ. Yang Jian shared this concern, for they were both driven by ambition. Ever since discovering this unfamiliar world, besides a sense of freedom, they were driven by a desire to further their cultivation. They too aspired to attain Daluo Dao, perhaps even to reap the ultimate Hunilum Dao fruit. In the original world, the Hunilum Dao fruit had long been divided up, leaving no less talented cultivators than Daluo Jinxin, unable to take that final step. Even the number of Daluo Jinxins was limited. To advance, a veteran Daluo was bound to fall, a matter of fate. Take Yang Jian, for example, gifted and strong. He persevered from the battle of the conferred gods to the journey to the west, achieving sainthood in his physical body, yet his cultivation remained limited to Daluo. Lin Hao suddenly realized, but smiled and said, "Wait a little longer to see how my opponent reacts." He raised his head to the sky, his gaze seemingly piercing the multiverse. At this time, eternity outside the multiverse has brought Jonathan Hickman, who has become Captain Universe again, to him. Chapter 518, The Villain Who Succeeds. "Oh yeah, I'm Captain Universe again." Jonathan Hickman looked down at his uniform, which he had painted for himself. This uniform boasted formidable defensive capabilities, enhancing Captain Universe's abilities to a certain degree. And most importantly, it was perfect for any figure. Regardless of height, weight, or size, anyone wearing it transformed into a 2-meter-tall, American tough guy. It was truly a blokestream. Mr. Editor-in-Chief, please put your joy aside for now. Our current situation doesn't allow for such extravagant emotions. Eternal's voice remained ethereal and majestic. For some reason, meeting Jonathan Hickman again this time had filled Eternal with resentment, prompting him to deliberately flaunt his prestige. His humanity was taking over. Stop talking. Jonathan refused to give him any leeway and bluntly said, wait a moment, as the true creator, how could the editor-in-chief possibly show respect for a character he had created? With that, Jonathan suddenly leaped forward, diving back into the sea of pink bubbles. Yongheng, who remained where he was, grew even more furious, wanting to smack the bastard to death. Jonathan Hickman, having returned to the real world, had triumphed and immediately appeared before Kevin Feige. Haha, Mr. President, long time no see. Seeing Captain Universe suddenly appear in the office and hearing the familiar voice, Kevin Feige abruptly sprang to his feet from his desk, shocked and furious. It's you. You've gained superpowers? How is that even possible? I have the official seal, HMPH, Jonathan sneered. Know your place. You have no right to speak loudly to me now. With a flick of his hand, Kevin Feige slammed into the wall behind him. With blood gushing from his mouth, Kevin Feige finally came to terms with reality. His mind raced, and he forced a fawning smile. Jonathan, no, Mr. Hickman, I was wrong just now. The president was about to play a game of tact, convincing Jonathan Hickman to take him on a flight, even if it meant switching identities and becoming his dog. This is immortality. How many people want to be dogs but never get the chance? But the noise of him banging against the wall had already alerted the secretary outside, who flung the door open. Sir, get out. Kevin Feige's roar startled Jonathan Hickman, who, having recovered from his triumphant mood, immediately grasped the stakes and reached out to the secretary, who was instantly dragged towards him by his telekinesis. Jonathan, who had previously harbored a lingering desire for the scantily clad secretary, engaged in a vigorous exercise right in front of Kevin Feige. Kevin Feige slumped to the ground, rubbing his chest as he watched the vivid live broadcast. He didn't care about the young, sexy secretary. Instead, he marveled at Jonathan's endurance. This must be the result of superpowers. I must have superpowers. Having satisfied his long-held desire, Jonathan regained his composure. Looking at the tearful secretary, a sneer suddenly played on his lips. With a snap, Jonathan snapped the secretary's neck. Kevin Feige shuddered, then uttered in terror, Jonathan, I can't speak. Another snap, and Jonathan snapped to his neck. Only the dead can't speak. After satisfying his lust and dispatching his once-hated superior, Jonathan finally began to contemplate the future. Captain Universe's power and status are equal to Galactus's attendant, the Silver Surfer. An even greater one serving eternity, the Silver Surfer possesses eternal life and immense power, so Captain Universe is only stronger. No, since I already have access to the multiverse, of course I must let eternity grant me even greater power. The human heart is insatiable. Having unexpectedly regained his Captain Universe identity and free reign in the multiverse, Jonathan Hickman certainly couldn't be content to serve as a minion to a character created by Marvel. Time to have a good talk with eternity. With this thought in mind, Jonathan waved his hand at the bodies of Kevin Feige and his secretary, and they immediately disintegrated into their molecular state, evaporating and dissolving into the air. After completing these tasks, Jonathan plunged back into the sea of pink bubbles. The real world hadn't been rebooted, because Jonathan had only eliminated a president, not destroyed the entire Marvel universe. How many generations of employees had Marvel undergone over the years? How many reorganizations had they gone through? As long as the brand remained, their work wouldn't be affected. Because the computer screen on his desk was facing away from him, Jonathan didn't notice the camera and microphone were operating. Although the camera wasn't facing forward, it captured a partial image through a reflection from a nearby metal ornament, while the microphone picked up all the sound. Following Lin Hao's orders, Arnim Zola didn't dare to make any further moves. He simply quietly recorded the images and sounds, then immediately transmitted them to Lin Hao via the Devil's Contract. Due to different temporal rules, and the fact that Lin Hao had to visit Deadpool before he could reach the real world, unlike Deadpool, who had direct access, By the time he received this information, Jonathan had already returned to the multiverse and been taken away by eternity. However, upon seeing Jonathan's actions, Lin Hao felt relieved. He was still just an ordinary person who had luckily gained superpowers, not possessed by an unknown entity. With Director Lin's current strength and wisdom, he naturally had no concerns about someone who couldn't even control his own desires. Why didn't the person behind this do it himself? He finally realized that the alteration of the cosmic rules in 1939 wasn't eternity's doing. The Transcendent? The Living Tribunal? Or that one above all who claims to be the editor incarnate? But if these entities were alerted, there's no reason to just touch on the edges. After pondering for a while, Lin Hao couldn't come to a conclusion. Eternity, outside the multiverse, questioned Jonathan about his experiences gaining superpowers and the ability to travel through time, but still couldn't figure out who was behind this. However, Eternal was certain that the entity that had restored Jonathan's superpowers was the mysterious force that had appeared several times before. The Transcendents and the Transcendent Gods have already left the multiverse. The presence of the Living Tribunal cannot escape me once it appears. As for OAA, is it really the editor incarnate? Eternal looked down at Jonathan Hickman, his mouth gaping open. Considering the only time OAA had appeared, it was difficult to connect the two. Hey, did you hear that? Jonathan shouted at Eternal. Do you agree to my terms? Why did you choose such a wretch? Is it just because he's been in the multiverse and served as captain of the universe that no further manipulation is required? Eternal, of course, had no idea he had so accurately guessed the truth. Mr. Editor-in-Chief, shut up, and call me Mr. President from now on, Jonathan shouted. No, from now on, I will be the king of the world, the only true god on the real world. Eternal once again felt the urge to slap him to death. Unable to hold back any longer, Yonghang snapped his fingers at him, and Jonathan appeared outside the Baxter building in the Earth 616 universe. Behind him was the portal opened by Lin Hao. Chapter 519, A Pair of Crouching Dragon and Phoenix. The show is about to begin. The raging battles across eastern North America were interrupted by the powerful appearance of the SHIEARD. Just as the aliens, superheroes, and Apocalypse were all wary of the SHIEARD, the standoff was broken by an unexpected force. 3 black transport planes with flat wings flew over the Atlantic Ocean. Unlike the propeller planes prevalent in their era, these transports were equipped with cutting-edge turbojet engines, emitting streams of flames devoid of fire but instead a stream of blue energy. The nose of the center plane housed a glass-paneled cockpit and control room. 2 men were present in the control room, the yellow-skinned Jingxin Yoshioka, leader of the Hand, and the white-skinned Johann Schmidt, a member of the Nazi Strategic Scientific Corps. You'd better have a way to convince Apocalypse, or I'll kill you first. Jingxin Yoshioka glanced at Johann Schmidt. Earlier, Chianki broadcast a nationwide broadcast that the Japanese invaders, who were about to attack Los Angeles on the West Coast, not only failed to share their common hatred for humanity but, instead, took advantage of the situation by accelerating their troop buildup and launching a general mobilization across the Oriental Islands. This mobilization included not only soldiers but also all other worldly forces within the territory, who were called upon to join the national war. As a supernatural organization originating from the Oriental Islands, the Hand naturally received the call for conscription. Jingxin Yoshioka could not abandon the Oriental Islands as their stronghold. He also discovered that Chianki was a mutant deity from ancient Egyptian mythology, capable of enhancing mutant power. To empower the Hand's mutants, the old Japanese invader set his sights on Chianki. The root cause was the excessive pressure Lin Hao was putting on the Japanese invaders. The rules Lin Hao had previously set against the Japanese invaders with the 6 Infinity Stones had already intimidated them. Seeking a sense of security, all factions within the Japanese invaders were racking their brains. Of course, Jingxin Yoshioka, a centuries-old devil, had his own reasons. Drawing on the power bestowed by the ancient demon beast, which allows him to reborn through a drop of blood, he considered himself worthy enough to confront Chianki. Receiving a call from headquarters, Jingxin Yoshioka's mind became active, ordering the Hand's personnel stationed in eastern North America to intensify intelligence gathering. Unfortunately, before the Hand could even begin, New York City was bombarded by the sovereigns. Jingxin Yoshioka had originally planned to personally visit with his teleporting subordinates, but instead received an invitation to cooperate within the Axis. The sudden appearance of a visitor from another dimension interrupted the war in this dimension, and the mustachioed leader roared twice in frustration. Xianqi's arrival clearly failed to quell Sandizi's expansionist ambitions. In fact, it had the opposite effect. Discovering that someone was vying for the throne of World King, the mustachioed leader accelerated a war effort and took an early interest in America. This was understandable. After all, the White House and the Pentagon were destroyed by apocalypse. A nation without its top leadership would inevitably descend into chaos, and any ambitious neighboring nation would have its reasons. Furthermore, upon learning that the Japanese had set foot on the North American continent, the mustachioed leader was naturally uneasy. However, the Atlantic Ocean was too vast, making a large-scale landing impossible, so they could only rely on a small, elite force. Last time, Apocalypse was abandoned by Lin Hao at the Strategic Scientific Corps base. Before leaving, he casually fired an energy cannon at the base. Johann Schmidt, dying, injected himself with an incomplete super soldier serum. He accidentally absorbed most of Apocalypse's energy, replacing the gamma-ray stream generated by the power supply. This allowed him to gain the serum's power, but his skin and flesh were burned, leaving him destined to become the Red Skull. After surviving, Johann Schmidt mobilized his clandestine forces to intensify his research into classical mythology, unexpectedly discovering the Tesseract, hidden by Odin in a Swedish temple. With the help of Arnim Zola in this time and space, they quickly mastered the technique to extract the Tesseract's power and created numerous war machines. Red Skull's Hydra doesn't rely solely on the Nazis' power. Otherwise, given the Nazis nearing their doom in the film, they wouldn't have been able to cause such a commotion. He must have his own forces, but he simply happened to be in the right place at the right time, hiding within the Nazis like a parasite, absorbing their influence. After acquiring superpowers and the Cosmic Cube, Red Skull, driven both to avenge his previous humiliation and to profit from it, believed he could participate in the frenzy. He accepted the order from the Four of Mustaches to serve as the North American advance team, intending to take advantage of America's chaos and seize a piece of the action. However, he didn't act rashly, instead allying himself with a Hand, a powerful organization he had previously clashed with. Even if they didn't emerge victorious, they could still secure a share of the spoils. Furthermore, with a Cosmic Cube in hand, Red Skull believed he didn't need to be an enemy of Apocalypse, believing they could cooperate for mutual benefit. Honestly, it was a pretty good idea. If only the Supreme Evolutionary and the Asgardians were present, he could have both sides, and even if he didn't gain anything, he could have escaped unscathed. But with the massive beasts now swarming around, his little white rabbit was a dead giveaway. Don't worry, I'm confident I can convince Apocalypse. John Schmidt stroked his beardless chin, quietly repositioning his misplaced bionic mask. The two crouching dragon and phoenix flew across the Atlantic, arriving just in time. The surging waves unleashed by the great sage had gradually subsided, and an inhuman submarine quietly emerged from the vast ocean. Only a cloud and a palace remained in the sky. Apocalypse had landed on a hill with his dozen or so remaining clones, still trapped in the isolated dimension created by Franklin Richards. The superheroes landed on the ground, their backs against a portal opened by Lin Hao, staring up at the clouds above with alarm. They can open a portal to our universe. Even leaving would be pointless, Nick Fury said gravely. Go back and fight, or stay here and fight? Everyone should have a choice. Choose? Even a choice? The remaining Fantastic Three rolled their eyes. Their headquarters building lay just across the portal, and if the fighting spread there, their base would bear the brunt of the damage. New York City had already been decimated by the aliens, so they might as well make use of the waste. No one spoke, but their silence made their choice. Nick Fury said no more. Just then, 3 black transport planes flew over the sea, and a man in a uniform emerged from the portal simultaneously. It was none other than Captain Universe Jonathan Hickman. Which universe is this? Jonathan had just been negotiating terms with Eternity, when in the blink of an eye he appeared outside the Baxter building. Turning around, he saw a portal behind him and, curious, approached. The editor-in-chief was clearly still confused about the situation and didn't understand why Eternity had sent him here. You are, Maria Hill examined Jonathan's uniform, which looked familiar. Several previous Captain Universes had joined the Avengers, though their appearances and uniforms had been different. Lin Hao, who was above the clouds, saw Jonathan Hickman appear and immediately smiled. The good show can begin. Then he said to the Monkey King and Yang Jian on his left and right, look carefully, I'm going to survive a disaster, The Monkey King took out his stick and Yang Jian raised his three-pointed, double-edged halberd. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 520, The Cosmic Consciousness Wants to Destroy the Great Demon King. A cloud of auspiciousness carried Lin Hao slowly down. The superheroes below became wary, glancing at each other before finally turning their gazes to Nick Fury. Superheroes like them were soldiers, and the current situation demanded the intervention of government officials. After all, this involved war and peace between two nations, indeed, two universes. Sir, if you are from the SHIELD of another universe, you should be aware of the missions of SHIELD. We must all work together to maintain peace in the multiverse. Nick Fury disliked speaking with his head held high, but the pressure the great sage had just inflicted was too great, so he could only resign himself for now. Okay, Lin Hao suddenly smiled, and the cloud carried him back a distance, creating some distance. How about this? As long as you leave this universe, I'll retract the portal. Nick Fury frowned, remaining silent. The Avengers had mixed expressions, but the Fantastic Three eagerly agreed. Okay, let's go back. Please retract the portal, Invisible Woman Susan Stone shouted. With that, he led the Human Torch and the Thing toward the portal. The portal opened right outside their doorstep, and they didn't care about the grand questions of war or peace. They simply hoped their home wouldn't be the first to bear the brunt of the conflict. Even if war continued, at least the portal could be moved. After all, they had so many powerful cosmic beings that they could hold up the sky if it fell. But just as the Fantastic Three were about to cross the portal, Nick Fury spoke up, unsurprisingly, MRS. Richards, if they can open it once, they can open it a second time. Clearly, he was planning to drag the Fantastic Four into the fray, as he valued the abilities of the young Franklin Richards more. Fury, Carol, his good friend, felt he was being a bit rash. Black Braised Egg's words were a statement, rejecting any possibility of negotiation. What are you doing? Unsure of what was going on, Jonathan, who had been observing for a while, couldn't help but jump out. He swaggered toward Lin Hao, hands on his hips, and demanded. I recognize all these characters. Who are you? I don't even remember your character in the series. It's easy to tell apart, simple enough to spot at a glance, because Marvel doesn't feature such handsome Chinese men in their works, much less endow them with such powerful powers. In the comics, of course, squinty eyes are a standard feature of all Chinese characters. Even in film and television, Shang-Chi is portrayed by a single-lidded, small-eyed man. Zhao Weijia is truly the pinnacle of Chinese-American looks in the Marvel Universe. What's he talking about? What character? Star Kevin Connor whispered to Hyperion beside him. And who is this guy? Shut up. Hyperion turned and glared at him. Hyperion could sense the immense power emanating from Captain Universe, a divine force even more advanced than star energy. However, at this moment, he sensed that some inexplicable, unexplainable energy from the universe was frantically pouring into the Asian man above the white clouds. You want to know who I am? Suddenly, Lin Hao appeared before Jonathan, startling him so much that he instinctively took 2 steps back. Jonathan Hickman once invents himself in comics as Captain Universe. Back then, he inevitably glorified himself, presenting only a powerful and omniscient image. But now, unlike before, he enters the multiverse in his true form, carrying his true, complete consciousness. His shrewd behavior after acquiring superpowers clearly reveals his ordinary mentality. His willpower is no match for Captain Universe's immense strength. He possesses power but lacks the heart of a strong man. Not good, Hyperion finally confirmed after Lin Hao landed. He's frantically absorbing some kind of energy. The Fantastic Three recklessly crossed the portal, while the other superheroes quickly retreated in front of it, feeling a sense of fear. Lin Hao, fully energizing his profound skills, was frantically devouring the spiritual energy of Earth and even outer space. Meanwhile, a purple thundercloud was gathering in the void overhead. Looks like we're not that different from where we are. The great sage in the clouds hadn't finished speaking when the distant calamity cloud suddenly dissipated. Vast swathes of spiritual energy continued to surge into Lin Hao's body like a tide, but without the thunder tribulation, it seemed like a step was missing before the quantitative change could lead to a qualitative transformation. Jonathan, frightened back 2 steps, flew into a rage, raising his fist and charging at Lin Hao. His speed was incredibly fast. While not teleportation, it felt like a flash of lightning. If Carol's lightspeed flight and the superluminal flight after unleashing the power of the twin stars required a stage of acceleration, Captain Universe didn't need one at all. With a resounding boom, Lin Hao raised his palm to block the fist, not retreating a single step, and seized Jonathan. Looking up at the sky, the purple tribulation clouds had vanished. What's going on? Not letting me through the tribulation. In an instant, a crack suddenly appeared in the void, long and narrow, with a slight curve. The tiny cracks on one side looked like eyelashes upon closer inspection. A moment later, the 2 sides of the crack began to vibrate violently, like the eye of a comatose giant about to open. Despite his efforts, he was still struggling, on the verge of opening. However, Lin Hao, beneath the opening, was as if facing a formidable enemy. With a flick of his hand, he deployed countless layers of defensive force fields. A golden light emanated from the nearly open opening, like a sudden flash of lightning in the darkness, hurling itself towards Lin Hao. Lin Hao's force field was instantly pierced, and the golden light blasted through his body, creating a bloody hole the size of a fist in his chest. Before the flesh and blood could even splatter, it was vaporized by the terrifying aftermath. Is this the thunder tribulation of this world? The great sage was incredulous. Fellow Taoist Lin, you've cultivated both the great heavenly immortal art and the 8-9 profound art. Your physical strength is only a fraction of the refinement of the thunder tribulation compared to ours, yet you can't even withstand the first thunder of the tribulation. This isn't a thunder tribulation, Yang Jian concluded decisively, his expression grave. Our thunder tribulation is more like a test from heaven and earth for cultivators. Though there's a sliver of death, there's a glimmer of hope. Survive it and you'll benefit immeasurably, but right now, it's clear that this world is rejecting fellow Taoist Lin. Heaven is seeking to annihilate him, the great sage suddenly realized, his expression equally solemn, yet it also stirred his pride. Since heaven forbids, then destroy this heaven. Due to differences in their knowledge and past experiences, the scene before them appeared one way to Yang Jian and the great sage, but to eternity, outside the multiverse, it appeared quite different. Golden light. When the OAA first appeared, it was also a giant golden head, its features blurred, yet it carried an aura of supremacy. Has this man finally reached this point? Eternity gazed at Lin Hao on Earth in 1939. Since discovering his existence, he had repeatedly viewed his future. Sometimes he could see him, sometimes it was blurry. In the scenes he could see, Lin Hao was just an ordinary earthling, living an ordinary life, just like the Lin Hao in other universes, who had not joined the SHIE and whose experiences, though different, were all ordinary. But this one, in the multiverse, was the most unique. With a bloody hole in his chest, Lin Hao spat out blood, but he still held Jonathan's fist tightly. Damn it, you're trying to use the thunder tribulation to make things worse, and you're targeting me. Lin Hao looked up at the crack in the sky and grinned, no matter who you are, it won't be easy to kill me. Chapter 521 Where is the chance of survival? Let go. Jonathan Hickman, whose fist was caught by Lin Hao, instinctively felt disgust and horror at the sight of the man's tragic condition. A normal person would naturally feel fear upon suddenly witnessing a gaping hole in another's chest. Lin Hao, however, paid no heed, even as the other man's fists continued to bombard him. What are you doing, fellow Taoist Lin? The great sage above the clouds was deeply concerned for Lin Hao's plight and eager to help. However, the current thunder tribulation was completely different from their understanding, and he feared a rash approach would trigger an even stronger reaction from the heavenly Dao. Don't worry, perhaps that person could be useful to fellow Taoist Lin, Yang Jian advised. Let's keep an eye on the others. Since this world is attempting to kill fellow Taoist Lin, I'm afraid human disaster is imminent. Seeing that a single stream of golden light couldn't slay the annoying bug, the crack in the void struggled to open a fraction. In an instant, a dazzling golden light emanated, drawing all creatures away. This is indeed the way of this world. Yang Jian's third eye flickered open and closed, tears streaming down his face. He quickly turned his head away. This time, over a dozen golden beams, several times thicker than before, blasted towards Lin Hao. Despite his relentless attempts to evade them, he couldn't. Unable to evade them, Lin Hao roared into the void, come on. Ever since he chose this path, he knew this day would come. Madman, let me go. Jonathan was terrified, struggling and roaring. When the golden beams had just passed his ears, Jonathan had felt an intense fear. Although they wouldn't actually harm him, he couldn't hide his fear. A series of booms and booms erupted, and Lin Hao was engulfed in the golden light. This golden light wasn't thunder, but it was even more terrifying. In the distance, the Avengers, who had retreated to the portal, all wore solemn expressions. Captain Marvel felt that her dual star power was far inferior to the golden light before her. Starbow looked down and saw the star symbol on his chest flickering, like a shivering cat. Sunspots were even more ferocious. The darkness that had once pervaded his body suddenly vanished before the golden light. A mere sunspot was nothing compared to this kind of power. Hyperion was fine. His power didn't derive from some kind of energy, but from the eternal Titan itself. The Crouching Dragon and Phoenix Chick duo, foolishly rushing across the Atlantic Ocean to take advantage, were in better shape. Their level wasn't qualified to experience the might of the golden light, nor were their strengths sufficient to perceive its terrifying power. So, to Jahan Schmidt and Jingxian Yoshioka, it was just a Chinese man being struck by the intermittent golden beams that fell from the sky. It wasn't a scene that destroyed the heavens or the earth, it was a mediocre sight. For that visual effect, even a penny was too much. Instead, the palace complex floating above the clouds instilled even greater shock and fear in the Crouching Dragon and Phoenix Chick. Is this the heavenly palace of Eastern mythology? Johann Schmidt asked Jingxian Yoshioka beside him. The centuries-old devil had indeed collected some ancient texts on ancient gods, including records of a heavenly palace, but now, thinking back, the supposed heavenly palace said to reside in a cave heaven seemed more like a joke than the one before him. Jingxian Yoshioka, momentarily unsure, didn't respond. Instead, he urged, take advantage of this moment to find Chianki. Johann Schmidt quickly ordered the pilot to fly the plane towards Chianki, perched atop the hills, and slowly descend. In the distance, the inhuman submarine quietly surfaced on the sea. Report. A black skeleton has been spotted. Charles Xavier, inhabiting Maximus's body, glanced at the screen. The floating skeleton had one arm and one leg. Though it resembled a skeleton, it resembled a mummy, with taut muscles clinging to the black frame. Curious, Charles channeled his telekinesis and discovered a beating heart and a comatose consciousness. Save it, the Inhuman, already controlled by telekinesis, immediately launched a rescue robot to retrieve the mangled black skeleton floating on the sea. Although numerous forces were present on land, no one paid them any attention. The dazzling golden light had dissipated, and everyone was curious as to whether the Chinese man was dead or alive. All they saw was a red and white body, or more accurately, a skeleton with some flesh still intact from the explosion. Even a few bones were missing and broken. Lin Hao's once handsome face was now gone, his hair and skin shattered, leaving only a sliver of muscle, giving him the appearance of a skeletal undead. But his eyes remained, their gaze unwavering, glaring furiously at the golden pupils that had stretched thinly into the void. Ho ho ho, his jaw opened, and a chilling sound emanated from his throat, devoid of vocal cords. I'm not dead yet, let me go. Please, let me go. Jonathan's fist remained firmly grasped by Lin Hao's hand. Though the hand had transformed into a flesh-threaded bone claw, it remained motionless, yet Jonathan was terrified. What do you want? I'll give it to you. The golden light hadn't harmed Jonathan's body in the slightest. Even the flesh that belonged to Lin Hao where his fists had made contact had been obliterated by the golden light, yet Jonathan's uniform remained spotless. Yet, Jonathan, caught on the golden light, was terrified. It was like feeling fire through glass. Even if one knew the glass wouldn't break, ordinary people would still be afraid, and the golden light was even more terrifying than fire. Lin Hao ignored him, his bone claws still firmly grasping Jonathan, even though he had lost the courage to struggle and only pleaded. Damn it, God, the great sage, high above the clouds, slammed his golden cudgel into the jade stone of the south heavenly gate, grimacing. This isn't a tribulation. In their world, cultivators had a brief window of recovery after each thunder tribulation. They could use magic tools, elixirs, or draw on their unique constitutions to heal themselves, becoming even stronger. Lin Hao, however, had no such privileges. While he lacked the ability to heal himself, his current cultivation level was more than enough to quickly heal his wounds. However, all his methods were useless, not even the force of time, as the laws of time around him had been tampered with. The golden pupil in the void was intent on killing. No, I can't deduce a life force. Yang Jian, his third eye still bleeding, spurted blood again. He had been struck back by the laws of heaven, or rather, the consciousness of the universe. If we can't find a way to heal, fellow Taoist Lin will surely die in the next wave of attacks. Before navigating the tribulation, Lin Hao naturally considered the possibility of failure. He had given Yang Jian and the great sage the TV retrieval stick and a PS4 with the game Black Myth installed, preemptively providing them with a backup option in the event of failure. As soon as the TV retrieval stick was inserted into the screen, the true powerhouses of the Black Myth world would inevitably appear in the Marvel Universe. Faced with this vast new territory, the Taoists, Buddhists, and Celestial Court could no longer afford to be petty and focus on the great sage. But this was their last resort. Perhaps because of the great sage's loud voice, the SHIE aerospace carrier that had landed in the clouds outside the southern heaven gate vibrated, and an unconscious man on the flight deck awoke. Chapter 522 The real Captain America is still a little short. The true captain, Steve Rogers, who had previously lost consciousness due to a magical transition, was picked up by the helicarrier. The Weather Witch had intended to abandon him to avoid trouble, but Lin Hao arrived with a heavenly palace. Amidst the unexpected events, Steve was neglected by Zheng Xian and the others, left alone and unconscious on the flight deck. Now, he had awakened. The movements near the South Heavenly Gate naturally wouldn't be hidden from the Monkey King and Yang Jian, let alone a living being. As soon as Steve woke, Yang Jian brought him clothes. This is where life lies. Counting on his fingers, Yang Jian spat out another mouthful of blood, covering the stunned Steve's head and face. Who are you? Steve, newly awake, quickly leaped to his feet, wiping the blood from his face. He looked at Yang Jian and the Monkey King warily. His body, however, yearned for the blood on his face and hands. The hunger from the zombie virus extract urged Steve to devour the powerful blood. Steve pried his left hand against his right, gritting his teeth and struggling for a long time, exhausting all his energy before finally suppressing his urge. No. Yang Jian's spiritual sense probed Steve's body, his face filled with disappointment. You're still a little short. It was Yang Jian who had originally sparked Lin Hao's desire to study the zombie virus. He had also participated in the initial experiments to purify the extract, providing Lin Hao with many creative ideas from the cult, and therefore was well aware of Lin Hao's plans. The zombie virus in the Marvel Universe was so powerful that a horde of zombies could kill Galactus, one of the creator gods. It was so powerful that even the omnipotent Eternal was powerless to erase it, and could only create a time loop to prevent the zombie virus from spreading to more universes. After obtaining the zombie virus, Yang Jian boasted that it would also work on him, even though his body had been sanctified. Unfortunately, the zombie virus was too corrosive. Neither Yang Jian nor Lin Hao wanted to become monsters driven by desire, so Lin Hao devised a solution, to enlist the Marvel Universe's most determined figure, Steve Rogers, to purify the virus's corrosive properties. Lin Hao concocted a theoretically feasible magic technique. Using the remains of Rama, he enabled the true Captain America, a red transformed and more resolute Captain America, to obtain the virus extract and the magic technique. This true Captain America of the multiverse lived up to Lin Hao's expectations, successfully overcoming the zombie virus's corrosiveness and cultivating his magic technique, gaining strength capable of rivaling the universe's greatest powers. However, Steve hadn't yet mastered his magic technique to the theoretically perfect state of yin generating yang, and hadn't completely purified the zombie virus. Is this person fellow Taoist Lin's lifeblood? The anxious great sage approached. He knew of the previous experiments the two had conducted, but the zombie virus was completely ineffective against the great sage, born as a stone monkey. The great sage, unfazed by these deviant practices, hadn't followed the progress of the later stages, simply knowing this. In his body, shut up, Yang Jian interrupted the great sage, signaling him to stop talking nonsense. Having chosen the same path, the true captain felt a natural affinity for Lin Hao and the shield bureau behind him. Much like a rabbit once felt towards a bear. Although it's gradually become known that Lin Hao and the Divine Spear Bureau are the masterminds behind the collapse of their America, Captain Zhen believes that greater responsibility lies with the American elite. Lin Hao and the Divine Spear Bureau didn't initiate the war. Instead, it's the American elite who are constantly betraying the American people. This goodwill must be maintained, at least until Captain Zhen has mastered his magic. He must not allow extreme anger towards Lin Hao and the Divine Spear Bureau, as anger will overwhelm reason and ruin his chance to cultivate his magic. The Great Demon King prefers to toy with people's hearts and has yet to commit massacres. His only 2 sparkling extinction finger snaps were intended to increase his points, more like pranks. It's not time yet. He hasn't mastered his skills yet. Yang Jian, after examining Steve's body, expressed resignation. He gave the great sage a wry smile and said, "It seems we need to be prepared to recruit others. At least when Laojin arrives, we can ask him to rescue fellow Taoist Lin." Okay, although the great sage yearned for freedom, he couldn't sit idly by and watch Lin Hao die before his eyes. Although his relationship with Lin Hao was more of a mutually beneficial transaction, he had come to accept Lin Hao's actions upon learning of them. For someone like him, what's the harm in taking a risk? With that, the great sage pulled out his game console, and Yang Jian produced his TV retrieving stick. Just as the sticks were about to pierce the screen, the golden pupils in the distant void suddenly widened again, from a mere glimmer of golden light to a narrowed, clear pupil. Behind the eyelids, the pupils slowly shifted, as if searching for the one who had disturbed them. Knowing he couldn't escape, Lin Hao remained motionless, raising his skull, now covered in a smattering of flesh, and staring fearlessly into the golden pupils in the air. "Submit, and you may live," a voice echoed through the heavens. Faced with this supreme voice, all the Marvel natives knelt unconsciously. Even the real captain, Steve Rogers, fell to their knees, caught off guard. Apocalypse, Captain Marvel, Star Sign, Hyperion, Odin, the Supreme Evolution, Thor, Hela, all superheroes and supervillains, all Earth's mightiest beings, and even the gods of the universe, felt a deep, soul-deep fear at this commanding voice. Even Yang Jian and the great sage struggled to resist the pressure of the golden pupils, dropping their TV retrieval sticks and game consoles. To prevent further damage, they immediately used their spiritual sense to retrieve the items back into their own small, self-contained worlds. One wielding a halberd, the other a pestle, they struggled to maintain their balance. "Damn it, Tathagata wasn't this powerful back then," the great sage cheered himself up with a laugh. "Haha, second brother, is your uncle really that powerful? Damn it." Yang Jian didn't even have the energy to glare, and could only spew out a vicious, "You better call me something else." Wait, fellow Taoist Lin is still standing. The great sage barely raised his gaze to see the scene below. Lin Hao grasped Jonathan Hickman with one hand, pressing his weight against him, using him as a crutch to maintain his standing position. How could his current skeleton weigh anything? Even if his body had been nourished and transformed through training. How could the weight of a skeleton and the few remaining pieces of flesh be enough to crush the mighty captain of the universe? Jonathan, however, was already terrified. Lin Hao's slightest push had him kneeling, not even noticing that he was the only one who wasn't terrified by the voice. True, he didn't have the natural fear of the golden pupils in the sky like the Marvel natives, but he was simply frightened by the 2 waves of golden light and Lin Hao's ferocity. "Submit," Lin Hao's broken throat uttered a distorted voice. "Do you have to be so cliché? By the way, who the hell are you? One above all, why only one eyeball? Am I, the great demon, so shameless, or did you actually want to give the whole thing, but got held back, so you could only give one? Sorry, it seems you can't even open your eyeballs." Another boom, a golden beam, thicker than the last, slammed into Lin Hao's skeleton, shattering his ribs and the shattered internal organs within. "It's getting anxious, haha." Lin Hao was speechless, his voice growing faint, but his eyes remained steadfast. "Do you know why I'm holding on to him?" Chapter 523, The Creator's elimination needs no reason and disdains explanation. "If you don't want to die, take me to your world." Lin Hao's consciousness imprinted directly into Jonathan Hickman's mind. With Captain Universe's resistance to psychic attacks, the frail Lin Hao couldn't possibly do this. However, the ordinary Jonathan had long since lost his nerve and was eager to leave this hellish place. So, upon hearing Lin Hao's voice, he immediately activated his special privileges and plunged into a sea of pink bubbles, carrying a broken skeleton. The sudden turn of events caused a flash of anthropomorphic surprise in the golden eyes in the void. This idiot, his anger was like thunder, shaking all life in the universe. The Avengers at the portal, the Asgardians in the distance, Apocalypse on the hills, the crouching dragon and Phoenix who had fallen from the plane, and the Inhumans floating to the surface. Every creature, strong and weak, was immersed in terror. Only the 3 people in the clouds struggled desperately. The SHIE agents originally recruited by Lin Hao to shore up the situation were repatriated to their base universe before their tribulation. Their continued existence proved useless and, in fact, highly likely led to their rebellion by the cosmic consciousness. The great sage and Yang Jian struggled, as expected, but so did the true Captain Steve Rogers. He even lifted his right knee with both hands, gritting his teeth as he managed to straighten his calf. This Steve Rogers, having undergone the Red transformation, was the true Captain America, representing the American people, not just an elite captain or bodyguard of the powerful. Although he had lost the benefits of the cosmic consciousness, his self-will had become more independent and resolute, fueled by his faith. After acquiring the magic power, he was daily subjected to the erosion of the zombie virus extract, and his cultivation and application of the magic power required him to withstand the dual effects, tempering his resolve even further. Although he was no longer protected by the demon contract, he relied on his own willpower to gradually overcome the fear within his soul. Because he refused to give up. Why? Steve leaned his weight onto his now raised right foot, overcoming his instinctive fear with dogged determination, rising higher and higher like a bamboo joint breaking through the earth. Finally, he stood up and roared a resounding question into the almighty golden pupils in the void. Why? Why can you make us kneel? Why must we submit? Why must the American people be bullied? Why are those damned powerful people allowed to reign supreme? Why do you, the so-called creator, actually support the powerful? Steve couldn't utter more, so he could only condense countless questions into a single word. This roar was filled with Steve's fury, harnessing all his energy, magic, inner strength, and the strength bestowed upon him by the super serum, all fused into this single demand. Those around him heard his demands, some trembling and bowing their heads in even greater respect, while others were horrified, amazed that he could actually do such a thing. Captain Black Skull, who had been taken to the Inhuman submarine by Charles, was awakened by the roar. Despite the pain, he cast his gaze towards the clouds above, even though he could only see a small screen. In the northern suburbs of New York, a modern factory built with futuristic technology had been largely destroyed in the aftermath of the Sovereign bombing. Within the ruins of an automated factory, a shattered nanosuit operated autonomously, carrying Tony Stark, whose organs were damaged, out of the rubble. As soon as he ascended into the air, he heard a distant roar. Tony couldn't hear clearly, and it was only after Jarvis, who had restored contact with the satellite server and relayed the video, that he could finally grasp what was happening. What are those eyeballs in the sky? Tony could also feel the fear deep in his soul, the instinct of a lesser being facing a higher being. Moreover, this golden pupil belonged to the Supreme Creator. Sir, I can't analyze it. I feel like I'm degenerating. Jarvis's response confirmed Tony's suspicions about the golden pupil. Lin Hao had previously revealed the true state of the multiverse to them. Haha, so this is it? Tony said with a wry smile. Our God, he naturally couldn't question the Supreme Creator like Steve, but after years of torture at Lin Hao's hands, this Tony Stark had more or less changed. Whether it was to protect his family or the world, at least he chose self-sacrifice when faced with a choice, demonstrating that he still had a shred of conscience. Only those with conscience feel pain when faced with the truth. Those masters and elite eagles who completely disregard the lives of ordinary people don't feel pain, only believing that the peasants deserve to die, believing that the leeks would grow back after being cut. Jarvis, if I die, take a set of servers back to see Pepper. Tony didn't dare to step forward, but he didn't retreat either. He remained kneeling, carried by the suit, floating in the air. So many people heard Steve's question, and the golden pupils naturally heard it too, but it only turned slightly and glanced. There was no golden light, no explosion, and Steve's upright figure simply disappeared without a trace. The Creator's annihilation requires no reason, disdains no explanation. At that very moment, Lin Hao returned, his body fully healed, still clutching Jonathan Hickman, and reappeared above the clouds at the spot where Steve had vanished. Taking advantage of Jonathan's escape from the golden pupil's lock and his return to the real world, the golden divine power's influence was negated by the rules. Lin Hao immediately used the power of time to restore his body, then calculated the time for his return. The timing wasn't perfect, but it didn't disappoint him. Since the time comparison between the real world and the multiverse was irregular, Lin Hao couldn't predict the exact time. He hoped the golden pupil would be gone by the time he returned, but he also worried about Yang Jian and the great sage. Fortunately, things weren't too bad. Steve even had a surprise for him. It actually worked. With a wave of his hand, Lin Hao used the power of time to restore Steve's body, but it was empty. Steve's soul had been annihilated. Even the death of one of the four great gods couldn't be undone. He immediately extracted a ball of blood essence from Steve's body, a mixture of zombie virus extract and demonic energy. The zombie virus extract, once agitated and frantic within the culture vessel, now exuded a peaceful aura, its blood-red color transforming into faint gold, the dark crimson hue of the demonic Zhanki blending into the gold. He seized this precious blood essence and divided it into three. Great Sage, True Lord, Quick, Yang Jian and the Great Sage beside him swallowed one portion each, before Lin Hao swallowed the last. Lin Hao smoothly pushed Steve into the portal, revealing the laboratory in the base universe. Though the series of actions were swift, they couldn't be hidden from the Supreme Golden Eye. However, its reaction was somewhat sluggish, as if something had drained most of its energy. Of course, Jonathan Hickman also contributed to the slow reaction, as the editor-in-chief was also an editor, and the golden pupil in the void was the combined consciousness of all Marvel editors. Lin Hao might not have been able to confirm the identity of the golden pupil at this moment, but eternity, beyond the multiverse, recognized it. He had sensed it once before, effectively seeing it once. Those golden pupils belonged to one above all. He was the supreme being of the Marvel Universe, the master of the living tribunal, the creator of the Omniverse, and the collective consciousness of all Marvel editors over the past 80 years. However, the OAA before him only had half an eye open, and his power was far less than before. Lin Hao's guess was correct. He was indeed being held back by some force, barely able to project a modicum of his power into the space-time. Chapter 524, No matter which world, why do we need the recognition of heaven? Idiot. The golden pupil in the void saw Jonathan Hickman being exploited repeatedly, its rage growing even greater. It finally realized it had made a wrong choice, granting this coward free access to the real world. However, the vast majority of its power was being tied up. It had chosen Jonathan because he had previously served as captain of the universe, making his actions simpler and less susceptible to interruption by the beings currently opposing it. Consequently, its previous attempts had all been through the influence of eternity or death, using their power to accomplish its tasks. This time, it finally managed to squeeze out a bit of its strength and personally traveled to the time when Lin Hao was undergoing his tribulation, aiming to nip the danger in the bud. However, the highly anticipated captain of the universe, Jonathan, not only failed to help, but was actually exploited. Unlike the perfunctory response it had previously used to eliminate the true Captain Steve Rogers, the golden pupil now fully shifted its focus, instantly erasing Jonathan Hickman's authority and superpowers. But he couldn't erase this person's existence, as editors were equals. He could only kick him back into the real world. However, Lin Hao kept grasping Jonathan's fist, and in the end, he only managed to kick his body back, leaving Lin Hao with half his arm. This scene meant that Lin Hao, this poisonous insect in the multiverse, had become powerful enough to be immune to his divine power to a certain extent. Above the clouds, Lin Hao seemed to sense this as well. He casually dropped Jonathan's arm and laughed at the golden pupil in the void. You can only hold out for this long? Your fighting ability is not good enough. Can I send you some medicine? Die? The golden pupil released all its remaining energy, and a dazzling golden light blasted towards Lin Hao. Is this your final burst? Lin Hao did not retreat, but instead advanced, punching the golden light and laughing loudly. Too damned little. The fist was full of power, but it only lasted a moment under the golden light, melting like snow under the scorching sun. This golden light seemed to be a kind of authority, targeting only Lin Hao himself. When the golden light faded, the south heavenly gate remained. Not even a piece of jade or a white cloud had vanished. However, Lin Hao's physical body had been destroyed once again, leaving only half of his spine dangling from the suspended skull. Even one of his eyes was missing. Only within the empty chest cavity, a bright red heart still beat vigorously. Strands of golden blood flowed through the veins where they once were, quickly outlining a humanoid figure formed from these vessels, emitting a brilliant golden light. The skull opened and closed, as if laughing. Thank you, you've sped up my digestion. The fleshless figure raised its fist again, a fist forged from golden blood, unleashing a crimson wave. Steve, since you've successfully taken the final step, I will return the favor. The crimson wave swept across the North American sky, but all life knelt, no one daring to look directly into the supreme golden pupil in the void. Red Ghost, after emitting a final wave of golden light, the golden pupils were reduced to shadow. Now, facing the crimson tide, they could only rage. watching helplessly as the crimson tide overwhelmed them. But before vanishing, they issued a command to all life, including within this universe and other parallel universes: annihilate Lin Hao and all those influenced by him at all costs. Even the 5 creator gods of the multiverse were no exception. After this command was transmitted throughout the multiverse, the goddess of death was the first to appear before Lin Hao. She gazed at Lin Hao, who also bore a skull, and her laughter was filled with longing. So it's you. Your soul must be delicious. Hey, take this stick from me, old son." A gleaming golden stick slammed down upon the skull of death. However, this skeleton was not the footless white bone demon of yesteryear. It raised its slender bony claws and easily blocked the great sage's blow. On the other side, a 3-pointed, 2-edged halberd slashed with a sharp, agile edge, intent on severing Death's other bony claw, which was reaching towards Lin Hao. Death didn't dodge, taking the blow head-on. The blow didn't even scratch the black robes woven from divine power. Just as Death's bony claws were about to reach Lin Hao's humanoid form, outlined in golden blood, a small demon wielding a black fork suddenly appeared before Death, intent on striking a blow against the Marvel Universe's creator god. The goddess of death, ever the master of souls, seemed to have encountered her natural enemy, and vanished in terror. The great sage and Yang Jian quickly surrounded Lin Hao, standing guard on either side. "Monkey, have you refined that golden blood?" Yang Jian asked. "Only a trace." The great sage clenched his golden cudgel, observing his surroundings with vigilance. "I feel like after refining the golden blood, my physical strength has increased, but my realm hasn't." "Me too. This world is destined to be free of thunder tribulations. I'm afraid our realm won't be able to rise any further," Yang Jian said solemnly. "If that's the case, I'm afraid we won't be able to compete with the sage-level cultivators like those just now. It's nothing more than death. What's the point?" The great sage laughed. "A cultivator cultivates himself. So what if there's no heavenly Dao's approval?" Lin Hao transmitted his divine consciousness to the two of them. "No matter which world, why do we need heaven's approval? Haha, fellow Taoist Lin is absolutely right. It suits my taste very well." The great sage smiled and nodded. "Fellow Taoist Lin, can you recover?" Yang Jian asked hurriedly. As the golden blood outlined the blood vessels, specks of white jade fluorescence appeared in the bloodstream, gradually forming jade-like bones, though the process was very slow. "It'll take some time." At that moment, Death returned, standing warily in the distant void. He scanned Lin Hao, trying to locate the little demon that had so frightened him. He didn't intend to act rashly until he understood the true nature of the threat. While the OAA's orders were unassailable, Death also had specific operational authority. He remained motionless, while several figures soared from beneath the clouds. Captain Marvel Carol Danvers, Star Mark Kevin Connor, Hyperion Mark Milton, Sunspot, Odin, Hela, Apocalypse, the Supreme Evolutionary, and all the superheroes and alien gods who had been kneeling on the ground now flew to the foot of the southern heavenly gate. Yang Jian and the great sage exchanged a glance and shared a smile. "Monkey, do you dare to join me in the fight? Three Eyes, don't hold me back." The Marvel natives rushed forward without further ado. They were no match for the goddess of death. The order to kill came from the Supreme Creator, and this was their sole mission for the rest of their lives. Although these people still retain their self-awareness, they must complete the Creator's orders at all costs. Chapter 525, Great Sage and True Lord vs. Avengers. Above the clouds, beneath the Nanshan Gate, the Monkey King and Erlang Zhenjin faced off against the superheroes of the Marvel Universe. Unable to disobey the Creator's command, all the Marvel natives rushed forward, with Captain Marvel and Hyperion, the fastest, naturally leading the charge. The dual star power clashed fiercely with a golden cudgel, creating a deafening roar that shook the clouds. Interesting. Besides that androgynous Guanyin, you're the only woman who can withstand my blow." Yang Jian, who was engaged in combat with Hyperion nearby, and Lin Hao, who was recovering, fell silent. If one didn't know the Monkey King well enough, one would have mistaken him for speeding. Carol silently counterattacked, each punch energizing the dual star power within her, mobilizing the most fundamental forces in the universe to collide with a raging mauling. Star Mark Kevin Connor, a few steps behind, saw that Carol could still withstand the monkey's attack and turned to face the battle between Hyperion and Yang Jian. At this point, Hyperion was at a disadvantage. His model was merely a regular Superman. While lacking the kryptonite vulnerability, its limitations were inherent. Yang Jian, The first disciple of the third generation of the Cham sect, had already achieved the golden immortal realm during the conferred Guts period. With his 8-9 profound arts and his 3-pointed, 2-edged halberd, he repeatedly defeated the second generation of G sect disciples. Since then, his physical body has become holy, reaching even greater heights. Now, having refined a trace of golden blood, his physical cultivation has further advanced. He faced the atomic beams without flinching, wielding his divine weapon and repeatedly slashing at Hyperion's now golden form. Unaware of his own limitations, Hyperion met the blows with his fist, his skin ripped and his bones broken. His eternal titan form, imbued with the golden energy, could withstand nearly any weapon in the universe. However, Yang Jian's 3-pointed, 2-edged halberd, a divine weapon transformed from a 3-headed dragon, was sharper than even the divinely enhanced Uru metal. Hyperion's ability to block the blow with his bare hands and save his arm already surprised Yang Jian. Interesting. You didn't disappoint me. Intrigued, Yang Jian increased his attack speed. Having suffered a setback, Hyperion was forced to defend, firing atomic beams from his eyes, barely blocking Yang Jian's sharp blade with the force of his attack. Without reinforcements, Hyperion's body would have been shattered in a dozen rounds at most. Mark, let me help you. Star Kevin Connor rushed forward. The star on his chest illuminated, and as Hyperion retreated, he fired a golden 5-pointed star beam at Yang Jian, who was swinging his sword. This burst of energy from the constructor impacted Yang Jian, halting his forward momentum. Hyperion was able to escape Yang Jian's torrent of attacks and retreated to Star Kevin's side, gasping for air. This guy is incredibly powerful. His body is the hardest substance I've ever seen. There were opponents he'd encountered over the years who could easily withstand his atomic beams, but they generally relied on energy manipulation to create a protective shield, like Carol Danvers and Kevin Connor beside him, one relying on the power of the twin stars and the other on star mark energy. The man before him, relying solely on his physical strength, completely ignored his atomic beams. Hyperion felt that even if he glared until his eyes exploded, his beam wouldn't be able to break the man's skin. I've seen it, Kevin Connor said gravely, as he saw that his full-strength star mark blast had only pierced Yang Jian's clothes and inner armor, leaving him without even a scratch on his fur. The last time he'd fired a blast at the Hulk of his own universe, who became stronger with rage, he'd drawn blood. Yang Jian retracted his weapon, glanced down at his chest, and then looked at Kevin Connor again with a more serious expression. The other party's energy manipulation was crude, but the energy itself was formidable. Your power is all bestowed upon you by others, destined to fail in achieving the great Dao. Yang Jian's face held a hint of sarcasm, tinged with regret at having unearthed a precious gem. These so-called superheroes each possessed energies far beyond their own comprehension, yet their limited cognition prevented them from truly unleashing their full potential. Unlike these cultivators, whose powers were all gained through practice, they could only attain enlightenment through comprehension. Yang Jian and the great sage both spoke in Chinese, but at their level, they could already communicate their meanings through spiritual awareness. The great Dao, Kevin Connor, seemingly distracted, was puzzled. Is it the laws of physics, idiot? Stop distracting. Compared to the ordinary college student next to him, Hyperion was a professional warrior, and after their previous exchange, he had become wary of Yang Jian. However, Yang Jian, from a distance, did not seize the opportunity to attack. Instead, he drew the slingshot strapped to his waist and quickly fired several beams of golden light at the two men. The three main forces of the Avengers charged forward, and naturally, the alien gods of Asgard and the Supreme Evolutionary were not to be outdone. Unfortunately, none of them were the superpowers who roamed the multiverse as depicted in the comics. Facing these small fry, Yang Jian unleashed a barrage of projectiles, one each. Odin, Hela, and the Supreme Evolutionary were struck head-on, sent flying backwards at speeds far greater than their charge, bleeding profusely. Father, Thor, specifically ordered by Odin to remain below, still slingshotted Mjolnir and soared into the clouds, only to see his father flying backwards. Faced with a so-called god of thunder who couldn't even summon thunder, Yang Jian had no desire to attack and retracted his slingshot. The small fry have been dealt with, it's your turn. With that, he reclaimed his trident and charged at Hyperion and Astro Signal. The portal below remained, and Lin Hao discovered that this portal to the Earth 616 universe seemed to have been deliberately left open by the OA8, and even his authority within the Temporal Variance Administration was unable to remove it. Meanwhile, Lin Hao was unaware that Marvel editors in the real world were working overtime to rewrite new comics and scripts, intending to scrap the previous Loki standalone and rewrite the multiverse that evolved into the World Tree. Furthermore, these editors were summoned to a sealed warehouse, devoid of electronic equipment, to prevent Arnim Zola from spying. The Supreme OAA had clearly discovered Lin Hao's vulnerability to the multiverse. Since he couldn't influence the Loki beneath the World Tree, they naturally inferred his control over the Temporal Variance Administration. Consequently, the Marvel editors were cutting off the source of the problem, attempting to overwrite the original setting with a new plot, abandon the World Tree, and eliminate Lin Hao's authority. Since Arnim Zola couldn't spy, Lin Hao naturally couldn't get first-hand intelligence. With the battle so intense and his body barely recovered, he couldn't find Deadpool to lead the team through time travel. Furthermore, Deadpool's free access to the real world was likely revoked. It's so hard to write a superhero. If you make him weak, it's unremarkable, and if you make him strong, it's even less satisfying. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.